Hello. Welcome to the Learn English Lab, today's podcast, Advanced English Listening Practice. Welcome to this deep dive. Our mission today is to explore a hidden linguistic divide that really affects almost all of our communication. It's this constant subtle gap between the words we write and the words we speak.
Yeah, it's a huge gap.
It is. And it's not just about, being formal or informal. It's deeper than that. It determines whether our ideas land with any real impact or if they just sort of slide right past the reader.
That distinction is so critical. We're going to take a really in-depth look at what makes writing professional or even personal writing feel sterile and distant and just forgettable,
right,
versus what makes it sound like a real person talking to another real person. It's this profound psychological thing, really rooted in how we are all taught to communicate.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We're diving into why we all seem to naturally reach for what we're calling book words, that heavy, formal, sometimes stilted language.
Even when we don't need to.
Exactly, even when the context is casual. And on the flip side, why embracing real words, conversational, direct, clear language is the key to making ideas stick.
It really is. It's the difference between prioritizing your message and, prioritizing your own image.
Ah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, the core problem you see everywhere, from memos to marketing, is that people confuse formality with seriousness. They think complex words equal smart ideas.
When actually the opposite is often true, isn't it?
It is. The most effective writing has always been conversational and direct. We're aiming for, let's call it, accessible brilliance.
I love that. Accessible brilliance. Okay, so let's start by defining this strange phenomenon we all seem to fall into. If you ever sat down at a keyboard to write an email or a report and suddenly found yourself using words that would make you cringe if you heard them out loud.
We've all been there.
Right. Then you've encountered what we're calling the Great Divide. It's that moment our normal spoken voice just switches off and this internal editor takes over.
It's a remarkable shift, isn't it? People adopt a tone and a vocabulary they would just never, ever use in a normal conversation. Think about that. You're consciously choosing words that are alien to your own voice.
Yeah.
The source material we looked at captures this perfectly. It says that many writers end up sounding like they're narrating a nature documentary about their own lives.
Huh. That's so true. So instead of just saying, I went to the store, they'd write something like,
I commenced a journey to the retail establishment for the purpose of acquiring provisions.
Right. This ridiculous linguistic custom. And yet, we do it. We cling to it. And that's because of this assumption that's been hammered into us since we were kids.
Exactly. The assumption is that to be taken seriously, good writing must sound smart and authoritative and, proper.
We were taught to elevate our language, to reach for the fancy words.
And to build these big, complex sentences like you'd find in an academic paper. Now, that has its place, but when you apply it everywhere, the result is writing that's just sterile, it's distant, and the reader feels that stiffness immediately, and they check out.
Distance is the enemy of influence. That's a key takeaway right there. If the reader feels you're talking at them from some high-up pedestal, they stop listening.
That's right. They start admiring the sentence structure instead of absorbing the idea. The goal should be to get rid of that barrier completely.
Okay, so to fight this habit, we need a simple tool, a diagnostic test. And this is where the dinner party test comes in. I think this is just a brilliant concept.
I agree. It's the ultimate litmus test. It's so simple. Imagine you're at a dinner party, you're relaxed, talking to a good friend. They ask you about something you've been writing. Now, if the words you wrote on the page are the same words you would use to explain it to your friend in that moment, you're good. But if you find yourself naturally translating them into simpler, more human language,
then you've used book words. The test is just genuine, unscripted conversation.
Exactly.
Let's run that vacation example through it, because the contrast it's just staggering. So your friend asks about your trip to Europe. The book version, the one you might write in some formal update, sounds like this. I embarked upon a journey to ascertain the cultural significance of coastal Mediterranean settlements.
And your friend would just slowly back away from you.
Right, they'd go find someone else to talk to. But the real version, what you'd actually say is, I went to Greece to see what all the fuss was about.
The difference is night and day.
It is. The book version has these 4 super formal, stiff words, embarked, ascertain significance, And the emotional impact is just zero.
And this is so crucial for anyone listening. Book words are basically vocabulary you only ever see on the page. They live in academic papers, corporate memos, government documents. They aren't wrong, technically.
But they create distance. They're a barrier. They signal that you're performing, not communicating.
Precisely. And real words, on the other hand, are conversational and clear. They're what we use when we're relaxed and just trying to get an idea across. They're simple, but, and this is key, they are not simplistic.
That's a really important distinction.
It is. The goal is not to dumb down your writing. We're not sacrificing complex ideas here. We're just warming up the language. We're choosing to make our ideas accessible by putting them in human terms instead of hiding them behind this defensive wall of jargon.
So when you use conversational language, you're actually showing more confidence in your ideas, not just your vocabulary.
Oh, exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting then. We need to understand why. Why is this habit of defaulting to formality so deeply ingrained in us? It feels almost automatic for me, to put on that linguistic costume.
It feels automatic because it is. It's a learned survival mechanism. It's a habit that was reinforced by years and years of academic conditioning. We were literally rewarded in school for writing in a way that, outside of a classroom, actually hurts communication.
Right, we got better grades for sounding more sophisticated.
Let's break down those lessons we all internalized. First, we learned that using complex vocabulary was a way to signal intelligence. If there was a long Latin-based word and a short, simple one, that meant the same thing.
You always chose the long one. Always.
Right.
About density equaled depth.
That's it. Second, we were rigidly taught to avoid contractions. No, don't, can't, won't. They were too casual. That one rule alone just instantly stiffens up your writing.
Oh, completely. It kills the natural rhythm of speech. And third, and this one might be the most damaging, was the push for these elaborate multi-clause sentences.
Yes, where you stack clause after clause until the reader has completely forgotten what the subject of the sentence was in the first place.
They have to go all the way back to the beginning just to figure it out.
Right. And the fourth rule was about maintaining distance.
Right.
We were told to avoid I, because that's, personal opinion, and to avoid you, because that's too direct.
Which makes sense for, say, a scientific report where you're trying to be objective.
Sure, but for persuasive writing, or just trying to connect with someone, it's a disaster. It removes both the writer's voice and the reader's presence. It stops being a conversation.
And finally, those rigid structures, the 5-paragraph essay. Everything had to fit into that box, which just stifles any kind of natural flow of ideas.
And look, the problem isn't that these rules exist. The problem is the misapplication. They're useful tools for very specific contexts, like a legal contract where precision is everything.
But we apply them everywhere. We write blog posts like they're dissertations. We write simple emails that sound like legal briefs. And the actual idea gets buried under all that language.
And the reader just gives up. Which brings us to the deep psychological reason for all this. You asked why we do it. It's because we use book words as psychological armor.
Okay, expand on that psychological armor. What do you mean?
It's a defensive mechanism. It's rooted in avoiding risk. Using formal, elaborate, slightly obscure language feels safe.
Safe how?
Well, if you sound really formal and academic, people might assume you're saying something important even if the actual idea is pretty thin. The complicated language acts like a smokescreen. It can hide weak thinking or a lack of a clear decision.
So formality is a mask for insecurity. It's safer to say optimization of resource utilization is required than it is to just say, we need to hire 2 more people.
Exactly. The first one is vague and nobody can really challenge it. The second one is a clear, accountable statement. Now, contrast that with the vulnerability of real words. Conversational language it's naked. When you write clearly, there's nowhere for a weak idea to hide.
If your argument is flimsy, the clarity just exposes it immediately.
Right. And that's why real words are ultimately more powerful. They force you, the writer, to actually have something meaningful to say. Clarity demands substance. You have to believe in your message enough to present it without that verbal security blanket.
Let's shift now to the practical side of this. If we want to move toward that clarity, we first have to learn how to spot and, surgically remove the friction that slows a reader down.
That's a great way to put it. We can see 5 clear patterns in how this excessive formality creeps into our writing, making simple ideas sound heavy and complicated.
Okay, let's identify these culprits so people listening can start hunting for them in their own work.
Let's do it. So, type 1 is what we can call unnecessary Latinisms and formality. These are the words that make you sound like you're giving a lecture, not having a conversation. They just add syllables without adding any meaning. It's linguistic peacocking.
Showing off your vocabulary at the reader's expense.
You got it. And the habit is so persistent. For example, people write utilize.
When they just mean use.
Exactly. Or commence instead of start. Terminate instead of end. Endeavor instead of.
Try.
And in the corporate world, you see facilitate everywhere. It almost always just means help. And implement is usually just do.
The real words are shorter, punchier. They're more direct. It saves the reader's energy so they can focus on the idea, not the grammar.
Moving on to type 2. Passive constructions that obscure agency. This is a classic move for avoiding accountability.
The passive voice. The friend of the bureaucrat everywhere. It lets you talk about things happening without saying who did them.
It erases the actor from the sentence. So instead of John made a mistake, you get a mistake was made. The classic corporate apology, right? The book version is mistakes were made during the implementation phase.
Which tells you nothing. It's just fog. The real version is we messed up when we launched.
And that difference is profound. The passive version makes the reader suspicious. They know someone's hiding. The active version forces ownership, and that builds trust.
Okay, our third type is a bit sneakier, I think. It's nominalization. Turning verbs into nouns.
This one is a real killer of energy in prose. It's when you take an action word, a verb, and turn it into an abstract concept, a noun. You're describing the doing as a thing.
It makes sentences longer and takes the people out of it.
It does. Here's a perfect example. The book version. The establishment of clear communication protocols leads to improvement in team performance. You've got establishment, communication, improvement, performance. All these heavy nouns.
And you have to work to figure out who's doing what.
Now, the real version just uses verbs. When teams communicate clearly, they perform better.
Instant. So much more direct and active.
And you see this everywhere. Someone doesn't improve something, they make an improvement. They don't analyze it, they conduct an analysis. They don't decide, they reach a decision.
Each one adds extra words that just drain the energy from the writing.
It's pure friction. Okay, type 4. Hedge words that undermine confidence. These are all those little qualifier words that writers use to sound cautious, but they often just end up sounding uncertain.
Like arguably, potentially, somewhat, relatively. Words that just add mush, not nuance.
And you should be ruthless about cutting them. Let's compare. The book version. This approach is arguably somewhat effective in certain contexts.
It sounds so weak, like you don't believe it yourself.
The real version. This approach works in some situations, or even better, this approach works when our budget is small. It's stronger because you commit to the idea. Hedging suggests you don't fully stand behind your own claim.
And finally, type 5, redundant formality. These are the phrases where one simple word would do the job, but we choose a 3 or 4 word version instead.
These are just filler. They serve no purpose. You see, in order to...
Instead of just 2, why the extra 2 words?
It's just habit. Or due to the fact that, instead of because.
That's 4 words for 1.
I know. At this point in time, for now. In the event that for if, with regard to, for about. It's exhausting just to read them.
As the source material says, in order to facilitate implementation just means to help do it.
And that's the core of it. We have to be vigilant about replacing these bloated phrases. Brevity isn't just about style, it's a sign of respect for your reader's time.
So we've identified the enemies, the book words. Now let's talk about the payoff. If we stop using this formal distancing language, what do we actually gain? Why should we take the risk of sounding too casual?
The first benefit is the foundation of all communication. Trust. Conversational language signals honesty. When you write to me like a real person, I instinctively feel you're being straight with me.
Whereas formal language triggers suspicion. You start to wonder, what are they hiding behind all these fancy words?
Exactly. Think about a sales email. If it sounds like a friend saying, hey, I used this and it fixed my problem, you're more likely to trust it. If it sounds like a corporate robot talking about leveraging synergies, you delete it. Real words bypass skepticism.
Okay, what's the second benefit?
This one is crucial. Using real words forces you to clarify your own thinking. You can't hide behind jargon. This is the old Einstein test, right? If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough.
Right, so the act of writing simply becomes an act of understanding deeply. It forces you to break down the concept until it's crystal clear in your own mind first.
It's an intellectual sharpening process. If you can't use simple language, it's often a sign that you've just memorized definitions instead of truly grasping the concept.
Benefit number 3 is a very practical one: efficiency.
A huge one. When you stop agonizing over finding a fancier word or building a more complex sentence and you just write the way you'd speak, writing becomes so much faster.
The words just flow. You're not fighting that internal censor who's always telling you to sound more academic.
That censor is what slows us all down. When you embrace conversation, you write faster, you revise faster, and your reader understands faster. It's a win-win-win.
And the 4th benefit is personality and memorability.
Yes. Real words let your authentic voice come through. They give your writing character. Book words just flatten everyone into the same robotic narrator.
And character is what makes things stick in our memory, isn't it? We remember stories and voices, not abstract, formal prose. The brain just glides right over that stuff.
It does. You're so busy trying to decode the grammar that you don't have the mental energy left to actually absorb the idea.
Which brings us back to that core insecurity, the trap of trying to sound smart. We use book words because we're afraid of sounding unintelligent.
But the truth is, unnecessarily complex language makes you sound insecure, not smart. You're using words as a wall.
The truly brilliant people don't need that wall. I'm thinking of someone like the physicist Richard Feynman.
The perfect example. Feynman could explain quantum mechanics using simple analogies and plain language. He wasn't dumbing down the physics, he was elevating the communication.
He proved that clarity is the real sign of intelligence. If you can take something incredibly complex and make it understandable, that's mastery.
It is. Now, what's fascinating here is that this isn't a strict binary. It's not always book words bad, real words good. It's a spectrum. It's about being intentional.
Absolutely. We're not saying a legal contract should sound like a text message to your friend. So when do book words actually work?
Well, formality has its place in contexts that require absolute, undeniable precision. Think academic journals, legal documents, technical specifications for an engine.
Places where ambiguity could be dangerous or costly?
Exactly. But the condition is that even there, clarity should still be the goal. You only use a technical term if it's the only word that provides that level of precision. If a simpler word works just as well, you should still use it.
So it's about being intentional with your choices, rather than just defaulting to formality out of habit.
That's the key. Okay, let's look at some real-world transformations to see how this plays out. Let's start with business communication, where formality often runs wild. Here's a book version of an update. Pursuant to our previous correspondence regarding the optimization of operational efficiency, we have determined that implementation of the proposed framework would facilitate enhanced productivity metrics.
My eyes glazed over just hearing that. It's so dense and cold.
Now here's the real version, saying the exact same thing. Based on our last conversation about improving efficiency, we've decided to use the new framework. This should help all departments work more productively. We expect to see improvements next quarter.
It's half the length and twice as clear. It gets right to the point. That's just respecting your colleague's time.
Now, let's look at blog writing, where connection is everything. The book version often uses these big abstractions. For example, the contemporary digital landscape has resulted in a diminution of meaningful human interaction.
It's technically true, but it has zero emotional impact. It's unmemorable.
Right. Now listen to the real version. We have 1,000 online friends, but nobody to call at 3 a.m.
Oh, wow. That hits you. Because you're replacing the abstract idea diminution of interaction with a concrete human image that everyone understands.
Exactly. And one last one. Instructional writing. This is where formality just makes things harder. Book version of a recipe. Prior to commencing the preparatory procedures, it is essential to ensure that all requisite ingredients and implements have been procured.
It sounds like a legal document for how to chop an onion.
It does. The real conversational version is just, before you start cooking, get everything you need out on the counter. Simple, direct, helpful. Using complex language there is just pompous. It gets in the way of the actual instruction.
And you see this in every field. In marketing, good marketing sounds like a friend's recommendation, not a buzzword generator.
And in fiction, dialogue has to sound real, and the narration benefits from being direct. The old man walked toward the store looking worried is almost always better than the elderly gentleman ambulated toward the establishment.
Unless you're going for a very specific stylistic effect. But for clarity and connection, the real version wins every time.
Okay, so for everyone listening who recognizes this habit in themselves, and I think that's most of us, we need some actionable ways to make the shift. How do we move from that unconscious formality to conscious clarity?
The first, the most important, the cheapest strategy is the one we talked about, the would I say this out loud test. You have to read your work aloud.
And if you stumble over a phrase or it feels awkward or stiff, you change it. You rewrite it until it sounds like a thoughtful, articulate person speaking. A great mental trick is to just imagine you're explaining the idea to a smart friend over lunch. Then write that down.
That immediately cuts through the formality. Okay, let's get into 6 specific strategies to break the habit.
Number 1 is the easiest win. Use contractions freely. Use don't, can't. It instantly makes your writing sound more natural and less stiff. Save the full do not for when you really want to add emphasis.
Okay, easy enough. What's strategy 2?
Favor active voice. Always. Put the person doing the action at the start of the sentence. Our team wrote the report, not the report was written by our team. It's clearer, it's more direct, it's more engaging.
Strategy 3. Choose shorter words. When 2 words mean the same thing, default to the shorter one. So if you catch yourself typing utilize, just consciously stop and type use instead.
Exactly. You have to build that awareness of your own crutch words. Strategy 4. Cut hedge words ruthlessly. Go through your draft and just delete most of your somewhats, your arguablys, your potentially Stevas. If you feel the need to hedge, be specific about the condition instead of using a weak word.
Strategy 5. Replace nominalizations with verbs. This one is huge for making your writing more dynamic. Turn those noun phrases back into action words. So, made an improvement becomes
Improved, and conducted an analysis becomes analyzed. It brings the action back into your sentences.
And finally, strategy 6.
Address the reader directly. Use you. Talk to your reader. It creates an immediate personal connection. And use I. Own your ideas. Don't hide behind, it is the belief of this writer. Just say, I believe.
It all comes down to confidence, doesn't it?
Right.
The confidence to be clear and to reject that old idea that simple language means simple thinking.
It really does.
Yeah.
And that confidence comes from 2 places. First, recognizing that the smartest people communicate clearly. And second, from seeing the results. When you start writing conversationally, people respond better, they get your ideas faster. And that positive feedback loop reinforces the new habit until it becomes automatic.
This has been so clarifying.
Well, this deep dive really reveals that the choice between words and real words, it's fundamentally about respect for the reader.
How so?
Book words are about the writer's ego. I need to sound impressive, but real words are about the reader's needs. I want you to understand.
That's it right there. Book words create friction and distance. Real words create connection and speed. Every time you choose a simpler word, you're choosing clarity over insecurity.
And that choice makes all the difference between writing that gets read and acted on and writing that just gets ignored. The future of effective communication really does belong to those who are brave enough to write like humans.
So a final thought for everyone listening. We've talked about the confidence needed to write clearly. Now think about the writers or speakers you admire most. How much of their appeal comes from what they say, and how much comes from the simple fact that they sound like a real person you could actually talk to?
That conversational ease, that's the real sign of mastery.
And if you found this discussion helpful, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving deep today into something that is probably the single most maddening part of being an advanced language learner.
Oh, absolutely.
It's that moment, you know the one. You've studied for years. You can read novels. You can watch films without subtitles. Maybe you even dream in the language.
You feel like you've arrived.
Exactly. And then when you're in a conversation, that one perfect, sophisticated word you need, it just vanishes. It's like a total mental whiteout.
It is. And I think the feeling, it's not just frustration. I'd call it a kind of a cognitive betrayal.
Betrayal is the perfect word for it.
Because you're not a beginner anymore, right?
Yeah.
As a beginner, you expect to forget things. It's normal.
It's part of the deal.
But now you can hold your own in a high-level debate. Your fluency is solid. And yet when you reach for that one precise, nuanced word, something like, deleterious or quiescent.
Nothing. Your brain just slams the door shut.
It just locks up.
Yeah.
It won't release it.
And what's so infuriating is that it's not just that the word is gone. It's like a phantom limb. You can feel that you know it.
Yes. You remember everything about it.
You remember the scenario where you learned it.
Oh.
Maybe the exact page number of the book, or the scene in the movie, or even the sound of your friend's voice when they taught it to you.
The evidence is all there. The context is crystal clear in your mind.
But the word itself is just hiding somewhere in the dark, and you can't get to it.
Yeah.
And that implicit promise, the one that says, hey, once you hit C1, things stick. It just feels completely broken.
And that broken promise, that is precisely what this deep dive is all about today.
Right.
Our mission is to really deconstruct this myth that vocabulary retention is permanent once you get to a high level. We're going to analyze the cognitive reasons, the behavioral ones.
And the structural reasons why these specific, sophisticated words are so uniquely vulnerable to just fading away.
We have to understand why advanced vocabulary can feel like it's built on such shaky ground.
So we're going beyond just, you didn't study enough.
Yeah.
We're looking for the why behind these specific slip-ups that really torment advanced learners.
Exactly. And the core insight, I think, that we've pulled from the research is this. Advanced proficiency, it's not a destination. It's not a finish line where forgetting just stops.
It's something else entirely.
It's a level of capability that actually requires an even more deliberate, more specialized kind of engagement than you ever needed when you were starting out. The rules of the game completely change.
Okay, so where do we start with the memory science behind it all?
I think we have to. Let's start by grounding this in the science and confronting what we call the illusion of permanence.
Okay.
This is this really pervasive psychological myth. It's the belief that once something is truly learned, you've passed the test, you used the word successfully one time.
Then it's just filed away forever, permanent.
Exactly, locked in. And we fall for this trap, I think, because of our experience with our own native language, our L1.
Right. In your native language, you basically never forget a word you use regularly, no matter how complex it is. It's just there. Rock solid.
And that phenomenal stability makes us assume our L2, once it gets advanced enough, should just work the same way. It feels like that's just how the human brain is supposed to operate.
But that's a fundamental misunderstanding.
It's a total misunderstanding of how long-term memory actually works. We have to, completely abandon this idea of memory as a filing cabinet.
Or like a computer hard drive.
That's another great one. It's not this place with neat, permanent folders where you just drop a word in and it stays there, pristine forever. It's not a static system at all.
So if it's not a filing cabinet, what is it? What's a better analogy?
A much, much more accurate one is a garden. A garden that requires constant active tending.
Okay, I like that.
Every piece of information in your brain, even in your native language, it exists in the state of gradual, almost microscopic decay, unless it's regularly reinforced.
Watered, to use the garden analogy.
Yeah. Exactly. The neural pathways, the little dirt paths to that information, they get overgrown with weeds if you don't use them.
And in our L1, we just don't notice that decay because the watering is constant. It's automatic. It's like breathing, right?
It is.
We're reinforcing our native vocabulary, from simple words to really abstract, sophisticated terms, hundreds of times a day just by living, arguing with customer service, texting a friend, watching the news.
And that creates this profound asymmetry, a critical difference between your L1 and your L2.
Even if you're a really advanced C2 level learner.
Even then, your target language just occupies a smaller slice of your total cognitive life. Even if you live in the country, you're still probably processing your internal thoughts, your stress, your complex problem solving.
A lot of that happens in your native language.
So the moment you switch back to your L1, even for a few hours, you've interrupted that constant reinforcement loop for the L2.
The garden doesn't get watered as consistently.
Precisely. And that reduced frequency of automatic reinforcement is the very first critical driver of forgetting. The sophisticated, less common plants in the garden, they're just not getting enough water to stay alive.
And this idea of frequency, it leads us right into a really key principle from memory research, doesn't it? The spacing effect.
It does.
We know that learning is way better when you space out your exposure over time instead of cramming. That space repetition.
Right. It's a huge help when you're first learning things, but for maintaining advanced vocabulary, it actually becomes this massive liability.
How so?
Well, this is where the spacing effect collides with the reality of high-level language. It creates what we call the curse of infrequency.
The curse of infrequency.
Okay. Think about the words we're talking about. We're not talking about table or walk. We're talking about words that elevate your expression. Words like concomitant or vicissitude or perfidious.
Words you know when you see them in a book. They're not totally obscure.
Not at all. But you have to ask yourself, How often do you really genuinely need to produce the word concomitant in a normal conversation?
If you're a philosopher, maybe a couple times a week. If you're me ordering a coffee, never. The gap between one time you need it and the next could be months, a year even.
And that is the bitter, bitter irony of becoming advanced.
Right.
The vocabulary is sophisticated because it's infrequent. The more precise and nuanced your lexicon becomes, the less often you will actually need to use many of those specific words.
So the wide spacing between uses basically guarantees that the memory trace is going to fade.
It makes them uniquely vulnerable. You learned it, you filed it away, and now the pathway to retrieve it is just slowly rotting from neglect.
So we build this huge, beautiful vocabulary, but a massive chunk of it is, by its very nature, always in the highest risk zone for being forgotten, just because we don't need it every day.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. And that brings us right into the actual mechanics of how memory fails. Distinguishing between the word being totally gone versus just not being able to find it.
And this is such a critical distinction. It can save advanced learners from so much unnecessary self-criticism.
How so?
We need to be really clear about two types of memory strength. There's storage strength and there's retrieval strength.
Okay.
Storage strength is just what it sounds like. It's how deeply embedded that information is in your long-term memory. The durability of the memory trace itself.
It means you've known the word for years. It's securely in the brain's archives.
Securely stored, yes.
And retrieval strength.
That's the dynamic part. That's how easily, how quickly, and how reliably you can access that stored information at any given moment. It's all about the pathway. How easy is it to pull that word out and use it when you're under pressure?
And the paradox for the advanced learner is, what? High storage, low retrieval.
That's it in a nutshell. You typically have extremely high storage strength. The word is definitively there. You've known it for a decade. But surprisingly low retrieval strength, especially on demand.
The word is safe in the vault, but you've lost the key to the door when you need to get it out.
A blocked pathway.
Yes. And this perfectly explains that thing that everyone experiences.
Yeah.
That shower realization.
They're classic.
You're in a big meeting or a high-stakes conversation, and you just can't find the word. It's so frustrating. But then hours later, when you're totally relaxed, washing dishes or falling asleep,
The word just pops into your head. Unbidden. Perfect. Crystal clear.
so what does that prove?
It proves high storage strength. The word was never lost. If it were, it couldn't have just appeared later.
Right.
But the failure to access it on demand in that high-pressure meeting, that proves low retrieval strength. The stress, the time pressure, just trying so hard to find it, it all just jammed up that weak pathway.
And when you're relaxed, the cognitive load went down and the path cleared up.
The word surfaced.
That's a really powerful way to frame it. So, okay, if the word is still there, just waiting, why does that access pathway get so weak? Is it only about low frequency?
Low frequency is the biggest culprit, for sure. But it's amplified by this huge asymmetry in how we use vocabulary. The difference between passive and active.
Okay, so passive is reading and listening.
Right. Think about it. When the word is presented to you on the page, your brain recognizes it almost instantly. It's a fast process of matching the stimulus, the word, to the meaning.
Your brain is going from word to meaning.
Exactly. And retrieval is easy because you have all this support. The context of the sentence, the visual of the word itself.
But the second you have to speak or write, the whole game changes.
The game completely changes because that's active recall, that's production.
Right.
Now you're starting with just the meaning in your head, this abstract idea of, say, like a vague, unclear concept. And you have to search your entire massive mental lexicon for the specific word, nebulous, to express it.
So you're going from meaning to word.
A totally different pathway. It requires way more effort, and it's a pathway that has to be practiced on its own.
And what's so fascinating is that this gap, this asymmetry, it actually gets bigger at advanced levels, not smaller.
It gets much more pronounced. Because your vocabulary is so huge, so many words end up in this liminal space, this borderland.
Where you can recognize them, but not recall them.
Precisely. You recognize them all the time when you're reading, which gives you this false sense of fluency. You assume they're ready to go, but really, they've just slipped back into that passive zone.
An illusion of capability.
And the fragility of this whole retrieval process gets even worse because of something called context dependency.
Okay, what's that?
Well, memory isn't stored in a vacuum, right? It's encoded with all the surrounding circumstances, the scaffolding,
Like where you were, how you were feeling.
the domain of knowledge you were in when you first learned it, all of that gets attached to the memory.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Let's say you first learned the word ubiquitous while you were reading a very specific, formal, scientific article about microplastics in the ocean.
Okay, so that scientific context is the scaffolding.
It is. Now, if you only ever see or use that word in similar formal contexts, the memory becomes overly dependent on them.
It gets locked in.
It does. So then, when you need to retrieve ubiquitous to describe something totally different, something casual like, his old pickup truck is ubiquitous in this small town.
The retrieval cues don't match. The casual context doesn't fit the formal, scientific one where you learned it.
And the word just fails to surface quickly.
Well, that explains so much. It explains why someone might have this incredibly sophisticated vocabulary for their specific job, but then struggle elsewhere.
It really does. A biologist knows the word attenuate perfectly for talking about signal degradation in the lab.
But forgets it when they want to talk about the sunlight fading.
Because the context dependency is like an overly specific security key. It only works in one lock.
And as if that's not enough, there's another problem.
To compound everything, we have the interference problem.
Okay.
As your vocabulary gets bigger and bigger at the advanced stages, it just gets crowded. Words start interfering with each other in your memory.
Your mental lexicon becomes a really crowded, noisy neighborhood.
A very noisy neighborhood where everyone is shouting something similar.
Huh, I like that.
And we see this interference in a few ways. You have similar sounding words, you have words with very closely related meanings, like synonyms that start to blur together.
Or cognates from other languages you know.
Exactly. They all start jostling for attention, and all that noise makes the meaning to word retrieval process so much slower. Sometimes the word you're looking for is just drowned out by its neighbors, even though you know it's in there.
That makes so much sense. Sometimes when I'm looking for a word, like 5 synonyms pop into my head, but none of them are the right one.
Yeah.
And the effort of pushing those away.
It drains the cognitive energy you need to find the one you actually want.
Yeah.
It's like looking for a specific book on a huge shelf where all the covers look almost identical. You know the book is there, but all the similar titles just distract you and slow you down. And in a fast conversation, that tiny delay means you failed to retrieve it.
Okay, so we've really mapped out the internal cognitive side of this. We get the high storage, low retrieval thing, the curse of infrequency, but that's only half the story. We also need to look at our own habits, the things we do as advanced learners that actually make the problem worse.
The behavioral and psychological traps, yes.
Let's get into those.
Okay, so the first big trap is really rooted in that production gap we just talked about. It's the psychological acceptance of the huge difference between how easy comprehension feels and how hard production can be.
So you can read a classic novel, right?
Yeah.
And you feel amazing. You understand almost everything. The experience is smooth. It's validating.
You feel totally confident. But then you try to write a detailed analysis of that same novel, or even just talk about its themes with a friend.
And suddenly those exact same words, the ones you just understood a minute ago without any effort,
they become maddeningly elusive. They just won't come out. And this happens because, as we said, reading just reinforces those easy word-to-meaning pathways over and over again.
while the meaning-to-word pathways, the production ones, are just sitting there, getting weaker from lack of use.
And that leads us to probably the biggest, most painful paradox of all, the fluency trap.
The fluency trap. Okay, this sounds interesting.
This is where it gets really counterintuitive.
Go on.
When you were a beginner or intermediate, every conversation was a fight, wasn't it?
A total struggle.
You had to claw for every single word. You were constantly practicing retrieval under pressure. And that struggle, as exhausting as it was this incredible involuntary workout for those meaning-to-word pathways.
But then you get fluent, and communication becomes comfortable. You can get your point across for almost anything, even if you don't have the most precise word.
And this is where the brain, which is the ultimate efficiency machine, steps in. You develop these brilliant workaround strategies.
Oh, I do this all the time. If I can't think of concomitant, I just say accompanying.
Or if vicissitude is blocked, you describe it as the sudden, unpredictable changes of fortune. You talk around the word.
And it works. The conversation keeps flowing smoothly.
It works perfectly. But hang on, a question here. If the brain is all about efficiency, shouldn't it realize that one precise word, concomitant, is actually more efficient than a long workaround phrase?
That's a really good point. Are we just being lazy and blaming our brains?
It's a crucial question, but it gets to the heart of what the brain prioritizes. And it's not lexical precision.
A successful communication.
It's successful communication with the least amount of struggle. The second you use that workaround and the other person understands you, your brain gets a positive reward signal. Goal achieved.
So it learns, hey, we got the message across just fine with those easy, high-frequency words. Good job, us.
Exactly. It learns that the specific, sophisticated word wasn't strictly necessary, and so it deprives that weak retrieval pathway of the very exercise it needs to get stronger.
So your comfortable fluency is actually accelerating the loss of your most advanced words.
That's the gut punch. The success of your fluency actively works against maintaining your peak vocabulary.
Wow. Okay. Now, what about for the people in our audience who are juggling multiple languages? The polyglots. That has to add another layer of complexity.
Oh, the multiple language learner's dilemma is a huge factor. Because your languages are not sealed off from each other in the brain. We wish they were, but they're not.
They're all interconnected.
Deeply. They constantly interact, they influence each other, and crucially, they interfere with each other. Cross-linguistic interference is it's a reality you have to accept.
This is that moment where you can remember the French word for something perfectly, but you can't for the life of you remember the Spanish one you actually need.
Or you're speaking Italian and you confidently throw in a Spanish word that sounds similar but means something completely different.
I've done that.
We all have. Those cognates that were so helpful at the beginning, they become a curse later on because they create so much confusion.
Right.
The brain gets tangled up.
And at the end of the day, it's a resource management problem, right? You only have so much time and mental energy.
It's a cognitive balancing act. Every hour you spend reinforcing your German vocabulary is an hour you're not spending on your French. So for anyone maintaining multiple advanced languages, some level of attrition in the language you're not focusing on is basically guaranteed.
You can't water 5 gardens equally every single day.
You just can't. And moving beyond just the structure and behavior, we have to talk about how memory itself is colored. We have to talk about emotional salience.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Memory is not a neutral, objective recording device. It's profoundly influenced by emotion, by context, by personal relevance.
We all know this intuitively, right?
Yeah.
We remember emotionally charged events with incredible clarity.
And this applies directly to learning words. Vocabulary that you learn in a moment of high emotion, it just sticks better.
Like a powerful expression you picked up from a movie that made you cry, or a technical term you had to learn to save a project at work.
Or even some slang you learned on a really fun night out with friends. It sticks because the emotion gives it more anchors in your memory network. The word is tied to a feeling, not just a definition.
But most of the advanced vocabulary we're struggling with, it's often learned in these very neutral, formal, academic settings.
Exactly. From reading dense articles or doing structured exercises, these are low emotion contexts.
High frequency of forgetting context.
Precisely. So that sophisticated vocabulary, because it often lacks that emotional resonance, is just inherently more vulnerable to being forgotten than the stuff you learned earlier that felt more relevant to your life.
And this whole mess is often hidden from us, isn't it? By the false confidence of recognition.
This is the advanced learner's worst enemy.
So you're reading and it's going great. Your comprehension is seamless. You see a word like penurious and your brain instantly recognizes it and you think, yep, got that one. I know it perfectly.
And it creates this powerful but deeply misleading sense of mastery.
Because recognition is not the same as recall.
Not even close. It's a terrible predictor of recall. Studies show you can recognize 5, 6, 7 times more words than you can actively produce on demand. And that gap is biggest for exactly this kind of low-frequency, advanced vocabulary.
So you keep reading, understand everything, and you mistakenly think your active vocabulary is just as strong.
Yeah.
And you don't realize you have a problem until you're in a high-pressure situation and the words just aren't there.
The gaps only become apparent at the exact moment you fail.
Which leads to the next big behavioral problem, the review resistance of advanced learners.
Oh, this is a big one. Frankly, advanced learners are often the worst at doing the very review work they need to do.
It makes sense psychologically, though. Beginners love flashcards and apps because you can see the progress immediately. It's motivating.
It is.
But for an advanced learner, the idea of going back to drills or flashcards, it feels like going backward. It feels like an admission that your proficiency is actually fragile.
It feels like regression. And not just that, it's boring. It's unglamorous maintenance work. It doesn't give you the thrill of learning a new word or a new grammar point.
Right.
And so that psychological block means that the vocabulary that needs periodic reinforcement the most is the vocabulary that gets it the least. You are, in a way, too good for your own good.
And finally, the psychological toll of all this.
Yeah.
The perfectionism problem.
Yes. Advanced learners tend to hold themselves to these incredibly high, often self-imposed standards. We expect to have perfect, instant recall of every single word we've ever read.
Which is completely unrealistic.
Totally. And when that expectation is inevitably shattered by a forgotten word, it leads straight to frustration, stress, and self-criticism. And we know what stress does to memory retrieval.
It shuts it down.
It floods your system with hormones that interfere with your prefrontal cortex. It literally blocks the retrieval pathway.
So the harder you try to find the word, the more elusive it becomes.
Yeah.
It's this horrible negative feedback loop.
It is. And the solution is often the most counterintuitive thing in the world. You have to stop trying so hard. You have to relax.
Okay, this has been an incredible diagnosis of the problem. We've hit the cognitive traps, the behavioral hurdles. Let's move to the most important part. What do we do about it?
Actionable strategies. Yes.
We need solutions that are specifically designed for these advanced challenges.
The first step, the absolute foundation, is psychological. It's acceptance.
You have to accept that maintenance is part of the deal.
It's an essential, ongoing part of being an advanced learner. It is not a sign of failure. It's a sign of a high-level skill. Think of it like physical fitness. You don't hit your goal weight and then stop exercising forever.
You keep exercising to maintain it.
You're preventing
atrophy.
Exactly.
So if we connect that acceptance to the memory science, the first strategy has to be targeted retrieval practice.
Spaced repetition systems are still your best friend, even at this level. But you have to use them differently. The focus must be, uncompromisingly, on production.
This means changing how you use your tools, right? No more flashcards that show you the word and ask for the meaning.
That's just testing passive recognition, which we already know is strong. You have to reverse the flow.
So the card should show the meaning, or a definition, or a context sentence in English.
And require you to produce the target word in your L2.
So instead of, what does ephemeral mean? It should be, what's a word for something that lasts for a very short time?
Precisely. That directly targets and strengthens that weak meaning-to-word pathway. It forces the exact kind of effort that the fluency trap allows your brain to skip.
You're training the speaking muscle, not the reading muscle.
Exactly. And that leads right to the next strategy: deliberate use and production.
It's not enough just to speak and write regularly.
No, you have to make a conscious, deliberate effort to find and use the very words you've been avoiding or forgetting. You have to push past that comfortable fluency zone.
So what does that look like in practice?
It could be having sophisticated word days. You identify 5 words you're struggling with this week, and you make a personal rule. You have to use each of them in writing or conversation at least 3 times before Sunday.
You're creating a demand for precision, not just communication.
Right. Write about topics that force you to use those words. Don't write a grocery list. Write a short essay on a complex topic that needs words like hegemony or dichotomy.
Okay. And to fight that context dependency problem we talked about.
You have to actively practice varying contexts. If you learned a word in a formal setting, you have to break it out of that prison.
So take that word nebulous you learned from philosophy class.
And immediately practice using it in 5 totally different casual personal situations.
Use nebulous to describe your teenager's excuse for being late.
Use it to describe the instructions for assembling IKEA furniture. Use it to describe your boss's vague plan for the next quarter.
You're building multiple robust retrieval routes to the word instead of just one fragile little path.
Exactly.
Now, for the polyglots out there, what's the strategy for minimizing all that interference?
Strategic scheduling is key. Trying to keep 4 languages at peak active production simultaneously is a recipe for stress and failure.
So what's the alternative?
Adopt a strategy of intensive focus and rotation. Dedicate a specific period, say a month, to intensive use of language A. Really focus your resources on reinforcing its advanced vocabulary.
And what happens to the other languages?
You maintain them at a lower passive level, read in them, listen to podcasts. Then after that month, you rotate your focus to language B.
So you're giving each language a deep watering session instead of just sprinkling all of them inadequately.
And it reduces that cognitive noise from interference because you're not trying to produce 4 sets of similar sounding words all at once.
Okay, that makes sense. What about turning all that passive vocabulary into active vocabulary?
You have to actively engage. Reading a lot is great. It maintains recognition, but it doesn't close the production gap.
So the actionable step is, don't just finish the article.
Don't just finish it. Immediately respond to it.
Write a summary.
Discuss the topics out loud with someone. Or write your own critical response using the very vocabulary you just encountered.
You're immediately turning passive recognition into active production, creating a closed loop.
It's a continuous cycle of learning and maintenance.
And to fight the low emotional salience of all that academic vocabulary.
You have to deliberately strengthen the personal emotional connections.
How do you do that?
You make the word matter to you. Connect it to a vivid personal memory. If you learn the word for trepidation, think about a time you felt deep trepidation and use that memory as a permanent anchor.
You can create vivid, even silly mental images for the word.
Or use it in sentences that are truly about your own life, your goals, your relationships, not some generic textbook example. The more personal a word becomes, the more resistant it is to forgetting.
And finally, how do we get over that review resistance and the perfectionism problem?
Mindset management, that's the key.
You have to change your reaction to forgetting.
Fundamentally, cultivate curiosity, not anxiety. When a word doesn't come to you, don't see it as a personal failure. See it as interesting data.
Data about your memory system's health.
Exactly. Look it up immediately. Note why you think it failed. Was it context? Interference? And then make a plan to use it a few times in the next 48 hours.
And then, and this is the important part, you relax about it.
You let go of the self-criticism. That relaxed, curious approach is not only more pleasant, it's scientifically proven to be more effective for long-term learning. You're healing the pathway, not punishing the system for being weak.
Because accepting that you will forget and that forgetting is just useful information, that removes the very pressure that was blocking the pathway in the first place.
You turn the problem into a training opportunity.
So, to synthesize all this as we wrap up, the core paradox is that your fluency, the very thing you worked so hard for, is what lets these advanced words slip away.
Because it allows you to communicate comfortably without them. The solution has to be a deliberate, conscious commitment to production practice.
And having a long view is so important here. Forgetting is normal. It's even okay. You don't need to keep every single academic word you ever learned in active memory forever.
The goal isn't perfect, permanent recall of a 50,000-word vocabulary. The goal is to have the strategies to reactivate words when you need them. You're cultivating a living relationship with the language.
The moment you accept that the maintenance, that the flashcard isn't a sign of regression, but a tool of mastery.
The emotional pressure just lifts, and you can focus on the targeted work that actually solves the problem.
So what's our final thought for people to take away from this?
I think it's this. Your brain's tendency to forget these sophisticated, infrequent words isn't a flaw. It's not a bug in your system.
It's a feature.
It is a feature optimized for cognitive efficiency. It's designed to hold on to what's most useful and let the rest fade into the background. Your job as an advanced learner is to constantly and aggressively convince your brain that the sophisticated vocabulary is, in fact, useful.
By actually using it.
By actually using it. Regularly, deliberately, and in new, emotionally resonant ways. The words aren't gone forever. They're not lost in some dark corner. They are just resting perfectly stored, waiting patiently for you to call them back into active service. If you're learning English, or, if you've been speaking it your entire life, you've probably noticed something a little bit strange about it. We have an almost absurd number of ways to say the exact same thing.
Right.
You want to say you're happy, and suddenly you're wading through words like joyful, elated, ecstatic, jubilant, gleeful, blissful. I mean, the list just goes on and on.
It's a genuine linguistic phenomenon. And that sheer abundance, it can be almost paralyzing for a writer, or even just for someone trying to speak. Why does English insist on having like 10 words for happy when one should technically do the job?
One of our source writers used this phrase that I just love. They called English a magnificent hoarder.
That's good.
It really captures it, right? It's like English has just accumulated vocabulary with this reckless abandon, like a collector who just can't say no to one more rare book.
But here's the fascinating part.
Yeah.
This isn't just clutter. It isn't random chaos. It's a highly structured system that was built over centuries of, cultural collision and conquest.
And that's the key.
Yeah. And by understanding where these words actually came from, you get this immediate, almost unprecedented control over the tone, the style, and the social implication of everything you say.
So that's our mission today for you. We're going on a deep dive, not just to marvel at the sheer size of the English vocabulary, but to understand the specific historical accidents that led to this surplus.
And then, maybe more importantly,
to learn the precision you need to really wield that language with power. It's the difference between just, speaking English and truly mastering it. Okay, let's unpack this.
And that unpacking, it takes us back about 1,000 years. And it reveals how history literally dictated our ability to choose a word that isn't just correct, but is perfect for the situation.
When we think about how language evolves, we usually imagine these, slow, almost glacier-like changes, a word kind of morphing over centuries.
For a gradual drift.
But with English, there was this specific, pretty abrupt and violent historical accident that just fundamentally reshaped our entire lexicon. It's what handed us this massive arsenal of synonyms.
And that accident, of course, was 1066.
The Norman Conquest.
Exactly. The Battle of Hastings was so much more than just a change in who sat on the throne. It was a fundamental linguistic disruption. William the Conqueror didn't just bring soldiers and castles. He brought an entire French-speaking power structure with him.
And this is so crucial, this new aristocracy, the rulers, the judges, the people running the government, the church leaders, they didn't displace the common people?
No, not at all. The Anglo-Saxon commoners, they stayed. And they kept speaking Old English, which is a fundamentally Germanic language.
So you ended up with the ruling class speaking Norman French and everyone else speaking Old English.
Which created this deeply structurally bilingual society that lasted for about 300 years. And this wasn't a situation where everyone just quickly learned both languages. It was a society where language mapped directly onto the social and economic ladder.
Right.
French was the language of power, of law, of refinement. Old English was the language of the home, the farm, the field, of daily physical labor.
And this context right here is the reason for our vocabulary surplus. Because for 3 centuries, these French words existed in parallel with the Germanic words that were already there.
They referred to the same basic things, but they were used by completely different social classes in different contexts.
So when the languages finally started to merge into what we now call Middle English,
we inherited both sets of words, the whole shebang.
Yeah.
And the result is that we now have structurally 2 and sometimes even 3 words for almost every single concept.
And those words, they still carry this faint echo of their original social flavor.
They absolutely do.
Which brings us to what has to be the ultimate, most memorable illustration of this historical class split. It's the cow/beef analogy.
Yes.
I think this is the moment where every student of English has that big aha realization.
It's the clearest example you can find because it demonstrates the division of labor so perfectly. I mean, think about who was doing the physical, the messy, the laborious work back in the medieval era.
The Anglo-Saxon peasants.
Right. They were out in the fields managing the live animals. So the simple, visceral, Germanic names for those animals survived. We still use them. Cow, pig, sheep.
But those peasants, they weren't really eating those animals, or at least not very often. The animals were being slaughtered and cooked and served to the Norman French aristocracy at their big, high-status banquets.
Exactly. So the peasant in the field saw the pig wallowing in the mud. The lord in the castle saw the finished product on his plate.
And when that food arrived at the noble's table, it wasn't called by its English name.
No, it was referred to by the French term for that animal. Bœuf became beef.
Pork became pork.
And mouton became mutton.
The distinction is just absolute. The English-speaking lower classes managed the live, dirty animal.
And the French-speaking upper classes consumed the prepared, refined, finished product. The entire social hierarchy, that difference between the laborer and the consumer, is literally encoded in the difference between the word sheep and the word mutton.
And once you see that foundational pattern, you start seeing it everywhere, not just with food. It's about basic physical concepts versus the more formal, abstract ones.
Precisely. If you look beyond the kitchen, you see the same duality in core human concepts. Take the idea of forgiveness.
Okay.
We have the Germanic word forgive. It's simple, it's intimate, it's often tied to personal relationships. You forgive a friend.
Right.
But we also have the French-derived word pardon, which is much more formal. It's often associated with legal or religious authority. You get a pardon from the king, or you ask for a formal pardon.
That's fascinating, because forgive feels like this heartfelt emotional act between two people, whereas pardon feels like an official release from a debt or a consequence that's being imposed by some higher power.
And this pattern, it extends to these big abstract political concepts too.
Yeah.
The Germanic root word gives us freedom.
A core visceral idea, just being free.
Yes, but the concept of rights, of formal constraints on power, of organized liberty, that was often codified under the French influence, which gives us the word liberty.
So while they're functionally similar, Liberty has a more legalistic, institutional weight to it than just plain old freedom.
Exactly. So we didn't just inherit parallel words for animals and basic actions like, say, ask versus question. We inherited parallel words for fundamental ideas, where the Germanic version feels simple and visceral, and the French version feels formal or associated with the ruling class.
So every single time we choose between freedom and liberty, we're unconsciously deciding whether we're speaking from the heart of the common tongue or the language of the statute book. That is just incredible linguistic depth.
And this structural duality, it is the single biggest engine behind the abundance of synonyms in English. It means that native English speakers, even without any formal training, have this built-in linguistic register that allows them to instantly adjust their social position just by selecting a word.
So that initial historical accident sets up a two-layered system, Germanic for the common folk, French for the aristocrats, but English didn't stop hoarding there.
No, it definitely did not. Subsequent linguistic borrowing, especially during the Renaissance, added a whole third layer that fundamentally changed the nature of scholarship and technical language.
So we didn't just stop at two.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We added a third, even more specialized layer.
Yeah.
Latin. And this is why we truly operate on a three-level system of synonyms, with each layer carrying a distinctly different social, intellectual, and technical weight.
And here's where it gets really, really interesting for you as a speaker or writer.
Yeah.
Because these three layers, they dictate not just what you say, but how effectively your message is received.
Right.
Picking the wrong layer is like trying to use a scalpel for carpentry. It's the wrong tool for the job.
Let's start at the base, layer one, the Germanic base layer. These are the workhorse words of English.
The foundation.
Absolutely. They make up the vast majority of our everyday speech. They provide the structural glue for the entire language.
They're short, often just one syllable, and they were around before 1066. You know, think of words like ask, help, child, house, begin, run, look, think. They're simple, punchy, and utterly indispensable.
And the key characteristic of this Germanic layer is its emotional directness. Its authenticity. Because these words have been in the language the longest, they feel the most honest, the most intimate, and the most visceral.
These are the words you use with your family, with your friends, in moments of raw, genuine emotion.
They connect deeply. They bypass formality entirely.
Think about communicating emotion. When you're genuinely furious, you rely on short, explosive Germanic words. You don't turn to your friend and say, I am experiencing considerable vexation regarding that situation.
Yeah.
You use something punchy and direct. And similarly, when you're just completely drained, you don't usually announce, I am experiencing severe physical fatigue. You say, I'm beat or I'm wrecked. The Germanic words just hit harder because they're less mediated by layers of formal usage.
So moving up from there, we reach layer two, the French middle layer. This is the layer that emerged from that gradual merger of the Norman ruling class's vocabulary with the common tongue. It's the sophisticated bridge.
And these words are a little bit longer, often two syllables, and they just feel more formal, more educated, more refined than their Germanic counterparts. Words like question, aid, infant, residence, and commence.
And this French middle layer is the absolute powerhouse of modern professional and public life. It dominates journalism, business communication, polite conversation, professional emails.
It's the sweet spot.
It is. It strikes a crucial balance. It allows you to sound competent and polished without being overly technical or pretentious.
Right. You don't usually ask for help in a business memo, you request assistance. Your house on a legal document is called a residence. It's a subtle but important elevation of status.
And when you launch a big corporate project, you don't just start it, you initiate it. It sounds more strategic, more considered in a quarterly review. This layer gives you professional distance, but it doesn't sacrifice approachability.
Okay, so that brings us to the top.
And finally, we arrive at the pinnacle, layer 3, the Latin top layer. This layer is the latest addition, often borrowed directly from classical languages during the Renaissance for the specific purpose of elevating intellectual discussion.
These are the highly technical, the academic, the extremely formal words. They're the domain of specialized fields. Law, medicine, science, philosophy. Words like interrogate, facilitate, minor, domicile, liquidate, and inaugurate.
The key purpose of the Latinate layer is precision and authority. Because these words entered the language through academic routes, they often come with very specific, carefully defined meanings, but within a closed system of experts. They are tools for communicating complex abstractions.
If we look at specialized fields, this layer is absolutely essential. Let's take medicine. A GP doesn't treat a bellyache when speaking to a colleague.
No.
They address abdominal discomfort, or maybe something even more specific, like gastric distress. The Latinate terminology provides that necessary clinical detachment, and it eliminates dangerous ambiguity.
Or think about the world of finance, a realm that's defined almost entirely by abstraction. Nobody talks about making money in a formal report.
No, they talk about capital allocation.
Right. Or liquidity, fiduciary duties, revenue streams. And why? Because that Latinate layer grants this instant perceived value and clinical detachment. It moves the discussion out of the emotional, simple realm of money and into the specialized technical realm of capital and assets.
That's a great example. It almost feels intentional, like they're trying to create a barrier to entry. If you don't know the Latinate terms, you can't join the conversation, which sort of reinforces the expertise of those who do.
It does, absolutely. And in law, let's go back to the house example. A lawyer drafting a will doesn't just refer to your house. They might specify your residence for tax purposes, or your domicile to establish legal jurisdiction, or they might refer to a dwelling when they're talking about temporary accommodation.
Simple Germanic words just don't have the definitional rigor you need for a binding legal document.
They can't. So when we put these tiers together, what we see is that English hasn't just given us synonyms, it's provided this linguistic control panel, a spectrum of tone that ranges from earthy sincerity all the way up to high scholarly precision.
And you can trace almost any concept across this spectrum.
You can. Let's take the idea of royalty. The Germanic base layer gives us kingly. It's simple, direct. It evokes maybe fairy tales, ancient lineage.
Right.
The French middle layer gives us royal. This is the standard professional word used for institutions, the Royal Society, the royal family.
And the Latin.
The Latin top layer gives us regal. This is highly formal. It implies not just status, but an inherent majesty, a certain bearing. You might describe someone's posture as regal, suggesting this profound formality.
Or what about a simple verb like moving upwards?
Great one, Germanic, rise. Quick, simple, often involuntary, like the sun rises.
French.
Mount. This suggests a deliberate effort and positioning. You mount a horse or you mount an assault.
And Latin.
Ascend. This implies a profound, ceremonial, or difficult movement. You ascend to the throne, or you ascend to heaven.
Wow. So the word rise just gives you the action.
But the word ascend gives you the entire cultural narrative surrounding the action. Every time you open your mouth or type a sentence, you're performing this historical selection.
Okay, so this historical structure gives us the raw materials, these three tiers. But choosing between, say, assist and help, or residence and house, it feels more subtle than just picking a class level.
It is.
So how do we move beyond the basic dictionary definition, the denotation, to truly master this arsenal?
That's where we have to talk about connotation. Denotation is simple. It's what the word means. Connotation is complex. It's what the word suggests. It's the emotional, the cultural, the social associations that it carries with it.
So synonyms share a rough denotation.
But their connotations can vary wildly. And ignoring that variation is what makes communication feel clumsy or, just wrong.
Let's explore that difference. Let's use the set. Tell, inform, and notify. They all roughly mean the act of making something known. But let's look at the emotional cost of choosing the wrong one.
Okay, so imagine a personal situation. If you say, I told my friend about my new job, that's natural, it's conversational, it's warm. That simple Germanic word fits the relationship.
Right. But if I swap that for the French-derived, informed, I informed my friend about my new job, it immediately sounds detached. A little clinical, maybe?
Yes, or like the news was delivered impersonally, like a mandatory HR update or something.
And if you use the highly formal Latinate word, I notified my friend about my new job.
Ugh, that sounds like you're communicating a legal requirement. Or serving them a formal paper. The word notify is just freighted with the baggage of officialdom.
But the act is the same, the transmission of a fact.
But the implied relationship and the tone are completely transformed by that one word choice.
Another powerful pair is question versus interrogated.
Yes.
Both mean asking questions, but the journalist questioned the source sounds like due diligence. It's neutral.
Sure. But the police interrogated the suspect immediately implies this intense, high-pressure situation, often associated with suspicion or coercion or even unpleasant tactics. The Latin interrogate isn't just about the action, it's about the manner of the action.
Right, and we have to revisit the simple descriptors of value. Cheap versus inexpensive.
Oh, this one is critical in daily life. Both denote low monetary cost.
But cheap carries that immediate connotation of poor quality or lack of integrity or shoddiness. If I call a product cheap, I'm usually insulting its craftsmanship.
Exactly, but if you call that same product inexpensive, you're making a neutral, observational statement about its price tag. The choice between those two words is the difference between a neutral review and a social slight.
So understanding all this emotional baggage brings us directly to the concept of register.
Yes.
Which is matching your vocabulary level to the specific context of the communication. It's the linguistic equivalent of knowing when to wear jeans and when to wear a suit.
Register is the level of formality required, and linguists have categorized 5 distinct levels. An effective communicator is constantly, subconsciously, performing a register check. You have to ask, who is my audience? What is my purpose? What is the setting?
Okay, let's look at this spectrum in detail, because picking the wrong register can have a severe social or professional penalty.
It can. So starting at the base, we have the intimate register. This is the language you use with your spouse, your closest friends, your immediate family. It's dominated by those layer 1 Germanic words.
Slang, inside jokes, grammatical shortcuts are common.
And, crucially, desirable. They signal closeness. Want to grab some grub later. It's perfect here. It maximizes connection and it minimizes effort.
Okay, next up is the casual register.
Right. This is for friendly but less intimate situations. Coworkers, neighbors, most of your social media posts. It's conversational and relaxed, but you generally avoid heavy slang or emotional shortcuts. Want to get lunch is appropriate. It's polite but relaxed. A mix of layer 1 and layer 2.
Then we get to the workhorse of professional life, the consultative register.
This is what you need for client meetings, professional emails, job interviews. You are polite, formal enough to convey respect and competence, but you avoid using $10 words. The French layer 2 really dominates here.
So something like, would you like to schedule a lunch meeting to discuss the project timeline?
Exactly. It's functional, it's professional, and it prioritizes clarity above everything else.
Moving up in formality, we find the formal register.
This is the language of academic papers, official government reports, legal contracts, ceremonial speeches. Here, Latinate vocabulary layer 3 is entirely appropriate. It's even expected because it aligns with the need for precision and gravitas.
So, we cordially invite you to attend a luncheon to inaugurate the new facility. The language itself is signaling the importance of the event.
And finally, at the very top, you have the frozen register. This is fixed, ceremonial language that is highly archaic and rarely ever changes. It serves to preserve tradition and gravity.
So things like the Pledge of Allegiance or foundational legal phrases. Wedding vows.
Exactly. To have and to hold, in sickness and in health. This language isn't meant to be conversational. It's ritualistic.
So the essential takeaway here is that the goal is appropriateness, not just trying to sound smart.
Right. It's not about intellectual showmanship.
The cost of misusing register can be so high. If you use the formal register in an intimate setting, you sound pretentious and cold.
And if you use the casual register in a formal setting, you undermine your authority and you risk being seen as unserious or unprofessional. Mastery means adapting your synonym choice instantly to the audience and the moment. It's such an interesting paradox, isn't it? English has granted us these 3 layers of sophistication, yet so often the oldest, the shortest, the most basic Germanic words from layer 1 are actually the most powerful and effective.
They just deliver this unparalleled emotional impact.
They do.
And this idea is so beautifully captured in Winston Churchill's famous saying, "Short words are best, and old words, when short, are best of all."
And Churchill was a master orator who just understood that when the chips were down, the simple words cut through all the complexity and spoke directly to the part.
To illustrate this, let's revisit that example of his legendary 1940 speech during the Battle of France. He was trying to steel the nation's resolve. He didn't use flowery academic language.
No. He said, "We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets, we shall fight in the hills, we shall never surrender."
And every single word in that repeated phrase, except for surrender, which was already, deeply absorbed into the common tongue, is simple, direct, and Old English in origin.
The power's in the rhythm and the total lack of abstraction.
Okay, now let's try substituting those words with their Latinate layer 3 equivalents, just to see what happens to the tone.
All right, let's hear it.
Churchill could have written something like this. We shall engage the enemy on the littoral zones. We shall combat them on the aviation landing facilities. We shall prosecute hostilities in the agricultural sectors and urbanized thoroughfares. We shall contest them in the elevated terrain. We shall never capitulate.
Wow.
Right.
That verbose version, denotatively, it means the exact same thing. But it's gone from being a rallying cry for survival to a bureaucratic memo. The emotional resonance is just. It's completely neutralized.
Nobody rushes to the barricades after hearing a discussion of littoral zones.
No. This contrast demonstrates perfectly where short words excel. They are the clear winners in any situation that requires sincerity, speed, or high emotion.
And this applies way beyond wartime speeches. Think about intimate emotional declarations. I love you is powerful and immediate.
But I feel deep affection for you and anticipate a continuation of our relationship is, well, it's not the same thing at all.
Not at all. And for action sequences, short words match the pace. If you're describing a quick event, she ran, jumped, grabbed the rope, and pulled herself up. It flows quickly. It's dynamic.
But the Latinate version, she hastened, vaulted, grasped the cordage, and elevated herself. It just slows the reader down. It makes the event feel clumsy and cumbersome.
And you see the power of the short word everywhere in commercial success. Advertising slogans thrive on this. Just do it. Think different.
Short, simple commands. They stick in your brain because they're emotionally direct and totally accessible. They feel sincere. And that's why politicians will often intentionally simplify their language. We need to fix this. Just sounds inherently more trustworthy than we must endeavor to remediate this situation.
But, and this is a big but, we have to be careful not to fall into the trap of thinking that simple is always better.
Right. There are crucial contexts where the Latinate longer word is not just better, it's mandatory.
And this is where longer words work better in the realm of technical and professional communication.
In medical, scientific, and engineering fields, the precise definitions carried by that Latinate vocabulary are necessary to avoid catastrophic errors. We mentioned it before, but a surgeon dictating notes must use myocardial infarction.
Right.
Because that specific term communicates a precise clinical syndrome to other medical professionals that the simpler term heart attack simply cannot. Accuracy trumps accessibility in that peer-to-peer context.
And we go back to law where precision dictates the outcome. Let's dig a little deeper into the distinctions between residence, domicile, and dwelling.
Okay.
To a layperson, they're all just synonyms for house, but legally, they are very distinct.
Absolutely. Dwelling refers simply to the physical structure someone lives in. Residence refers to where a person lives for a period of time, which can influence local taxes or voting eligibility.
But domicile?
Domicile is the specific, permanent place where a person intends to return and establish their legal home. And that's crucial for inheritance, for jurisdiction, for the application of state law. These words are not interchangeable. They are sharp, legal instruments. Trying to use simple Germanic terms there would create dangerous legal ambiguity.
And beyond just precision, longer words also serve a valuable function in prose style and variety. Good writing avoids mindless repetition.
Sure. If you've already used the Germanic word help twice in a short paragraph, you switch to assist or aid for the third time. It improves the flow and keeps the prose from becoming monotonous without sacrificing clarity.
And of course, there's the use of euphemism and tact. While Churchill prized directness, sometimes social situations demand a gentler, more formal synonym for sensitive topics.
We rarely use the blunt Germanic word died in an obituary. Passed away or expired are often preferred because they offer a slight layer of necessary emotional insulation.
But once a writer discovers this immense synonym treasure chest, they often fall victim to a self-sabotaging mistake.
Yes. Elegant variation.
Explain that. What is it?
Elegant variation is the mistake of compulsively using different words for the same thing, purely to avoid repetition, even when repetition would be clearer and more effective. It's often fueled by this misguided belief that using the same word twice is a sign of a poor vocabulary.
This is all over some forms of journalistic writing. You'll see an article about a major tech company. The writer, trying to sound sophisticated, might call it the company in the first paragraph.
Then the electric vehicle manufacturer.
And Elon Musk's automotive venture.
And finally, the California-based firm.
And what happens?
The reader is forced to constantly pause and decode whether these four distinct descriptions refer to the same entity or four different ones. The cognitive load for the reader just skyrockets, and the clarity plummets.
A good writer should never feel obligated to call a spade anything but a spade.
Exactly. If you constantly call it the manual earth-moving implement, you're not writing well. You're just showing off your thesaurus. And that's a guaranteed way to lose your reader's trust and focus.
This is the essential contrast with powerful rhetorical repetition, like Martin Luther King Jr.'s use of the phrase, "I have a dream." He didn't swap dream for vision or aspiration. He repeated it 8 times because that repetition didn't confuse. It built immense rhetorical and emotional momentum. Synonyms are powerful tools, but they should only be used when they genuinely add precision, adjust the tone, or improve the rhythm, never merely for the sake of avoiding clarity.
So now we move into what is probably the subtlest, trickiest part of mastering synonyms. Navigating the tiny differences between words that appear interchangeable but are absolutely not.
These are the false friends.
Exactly. And precision demands that you understand these usage differences, especially when you're communicating professionally.
Let's look at some of the classic pairs that trip up even the most careful writers. The first one, and maybe the most common error, is imply versus infer.
Oh, that's a huge one. They sound like they should be linked, but they're defined by opposite directions of communication.
So what's the difference?
The speaker implies. They suggest something indirectly, or they hint at it. The listener infers. They draw a conclusion based on the speaker's implication.
So they're opposites in function.
Completely. You can't imply something from a text, you can only infer something from it. The action starts with the speaker, implying, and it finishes with the listener, inferring.
Okay, another essential pair, especially in academic or analytical writing, is affect versus effect.
This one requires some careful scrutiny. Typically, affect with an A is the verb. It means to influence or impact something. The weather affected our travel plan.
Okay, and effect?
Effect with an E is usually the noun. It's the result or the consequence. The effect of the weather was a canceled flight.
There are exceptions, though.
There are. Effect can be a verb meaning to bring about, like he effected a change in policy, but just holding to that basic noun-verb distinction will cover 95% of common usage errors.
Then there's the subtle difference that really signals professionalism.
Yeah.
Disinterested versus uninterested. I know I used to confuse these all the time.
Most people do. But disinterested is a compliment. It means impartial, unbiased, neutral, exactly what you want in a judge or an arbitrator or a referee.
And uninterested.
Uninterested just means not caring, bored, or having no stake in the outcome. A disinterested person brings objectivity. An uninterested person simply doesn't pay attention. Using disinterested when you mean uninterested is a classic sign that the writer hasn't quite mastered the formal register.
And we have to revisit the distance words. Farther versus further.
The quick rule of thumb here is still really reliable. Farther refers to physical distance that you could literally measure in feet or miles. The moon is farther away than the space station.
So you can measure it?
Yes. Further refers to metaphorical distance, extent, or degree. We need to discuss this further at the next meeting. You can't physically quantify a further discussion, so you use further.
And finally, a distinction that adds necessary weight to historical writing.
Historic versus historical.
Historical is the neutral term. It just means relating to the past or set in the past. A book about the 18th century is a historical book. But historic.
Historic carries significance. It means important, momentous, something that will be remembered and studied. The 1776 signing of the Declaration of Independence was a historic event.
Okay, so a detailed diary written by a common soldier during that time
Is a fascinating historical document. The difference is the weight that you apply to it.
Okay, moving away from pure semantic meaning, we have to consider the aesthetic quality of our choices. What one of our sources called the music of words. It's about sound, rhythm, and this subtle field of, phonosemantics.
Phonosemantics, yeah. It's the idea that the very sound of a word can carry meaning or emotional weight, independent of its strict definition. Your word choice affects the reading experience even when you're reading silently in your head.
So if you want your writing to feel smooth or fast or gentle,
your choice of synonyms has to reflect that sound. Think of poets who choose words deliberately for the texture of their sound. They might use harsh, abrupt consonant sounds plosives, like P, B, T, D, K, in words like crack, smash, battered. These sounds reinforce a sense of violence or speed or confrontation.
And conversely, if they want to evoke a sense of quiet or softness or flow, they rely on sibilants or soft sounds like S, M, L, R in words like murmur, flowing, smooth, gentle.
The sounds themselves become part of the experience.
And rhythm is so vital here. We touched on this with the Churchill example, but it applies to everyday prose. Compare The runner charged past the barrier, winning the race. It's fast, it's punchy, it's simple.
Right. Versus the competitor proceeded with alacrity beyond the restrictive demarcation, achieving victory in the competition.
It's slow, heavy, cumbersome.
The second version, because of the density of those layer 3 words, just drags the pace down considerably. When you read your own writing aloud, if you constantly stumble, the issue is often rhythm, and a simple synonym swap can instantly smooth out the flow.
And this mastery of nuance and sound allows writers to create their own unique voice by deliberately managing the tension between the different registers.
This is the power of unexpected word choice. Look at Ernest Hemingway. He fundamentally changed prose style by prioritizing simple, short Germanic words.
Critics at first saw it as simplistic.
They did, but that clarity created this revolutionary authenticity. It forced the reader to feel the raw emotion without the buffer of all this excessive, abstract Latinate prose.
And on the other hand, you have writers like P.G. Wodehouse who did the exact opposite.
Right. He used extremely elaborate, formal language to describe utterly trivial events for comic effect. His characters don't just walk, they might navigate the thoroughfare with considerable vim, or proceed with a distinct air of perturbation.
The humor is creating by that massive, inappropriate gap between the highly formal vocabulary and the mundane action.
The message is clear. Your deliberate choice of synonyms creates your voice, and it guides the reader's entire emotional and intellectual experience. You're crafting a unique style.
Which brings us to the final challenge in modern communication, the jargon dilemma. How do we balance the absolute necessity for Latinate precision with the need for accessibility when we're talking to the general public?
Every specialized field, whether it's chemistry, game theory, corporate law, has its jargon. It's specialized layer 3 vocabulary. And this is essential shorthand that lets experts communicate complex, nuanced ideas precisely and efficiently with each other.
When a climate scientist discusses anthropogenic climate forcing with colleagues,
they're being highly accurate and specific, but that term is absolutely useless for public dialogue. It just alienates the audience.
So in that situation, the communicator has a duty to translate.
They do. The scientist needs to change the specialized term, anthropogenic climate forcing, to the accessible, commonly understood layer 12 phrase, human-caused climate change. The technical term is more precise, but the accessible version communicates the core concept effectively and inclusively to a non-expert audience.
So the rule must be dictated by the audience.
Absolutely. If you are writing for experts in the field, use their precise technical language to gain credibility and ensure accuracy. If you are writing for a general audience, always prioritize clarity and accessibility over technical precision, unless that precision is absolutely vital for safety or understanding the core claim. Your ultimate goal must always be to ensure your audience understands what you're communicating, not just that you said it correctly. #outro.
To synthesize everything we've covered, mastering synonym choice in English really requires you to juggle 4 interconnected factors: your exact intended meaning, your intended audience, the appropriate emotional tone, and the context of the communication, the register.
And the foundational knowledge is the history. Understanding that the 3 layers, Germanic, French, Latin, automatically assign a social, a professional, and an emotional weight to your words. You are never choosing words randomly. You're choosing from a historically weighted linguistic menu.
And the practical applications are knowing when to adjust your formality, formal for a legal contract, intimate for a text message, and understanding that often those short, old words win for sincerity and emotional impact, like we saw with Churchill.
And critically, avoid that pitfall of elegant variation. Clarity always trumps showing off your vocabulary.
So if we connect this all to the bigger picture,
the choice of a synonym is never a passive act. It is always a strategic decision about how you wish to be perceived, as sincere, as scholarly, as professional, or as demanding, and what action you want your words to inspire in the person who's listening.
English's vast, messy, magnificent collection of synonyms. It isn't a burden. It's an incredible, powerful feature. It means that you, as the user of the language, have this unprecedented control over tone, style, and precision. You can tailor your communication perfectly to any situation, to any person.
The ultimate goal isn't just knowing the meaning of every single word. It's learning to choose words that say what you want said, the way you want it said, to the people you want to reach, in the voice you want them to hear. That, fundamentally, is the highest art of communication itself.
So, what does this all mean for you, the learner? Go back and read something official you wrote this week. A work email, a report, maybe even a detailed social media comment. Analyze it. Did the simple Germanic words dominate, or were you leaning heavily into that Latinate vocabulary? Was the cow on the plate, or was it the beef? What did that linguistic choice say about your intended authority and your underlying relationship with the person you were talking to? That's your deep dive homework.
Until next time, keep digging into the words that shape our world. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a scalpel to something we all do, probably hundreds of times a day, but almost never scrutinize.
And that's the words we choose.
Exactly. The words we choose when we speak, especially, spontaneously. If you've ever had that feeling where your brilliant idea just fails to launch, or your argument sort of fizzles out, the problem, and this is what we found, might not have been the idea itself. It might have been the package it arrived in.
That idea of the package, the presentation, that's everything. Our entire investigation today really kicks off with a quote that I think should be taped above every single laptop.
I know which one you mean.
It's Mark Twain's observation. He said, "The difference between the almost right word and the right word is really a large matter. It's the difference between the lightning bug and the lightning."
I just love that image.
Yeah.
I really do. It captures the stakes so perfectly.
Right.
It's not just about finding a word that sort of works. It's about finding the word that carries this, this fundamental explosive power.
That's the lightning.
That's the lightning. And we've spent a lot of time compiling research, looking at deep dives into the art and really the science of precise spoken communication.
Yeah.
And what we found goes so far beyond just, sounding eloquent.
Oh, absolutely. The research we've pulled together suggests that precision is probably the primary difference between being, forgettable and being a leader.
That's a strong statement.
It is, but it's what the data suggests. It determines that moment your idea lands with the force of lightning, or the moment it just fails to ignite. It just, glows faintly like a lightning bug in the corner.
Okay, so our mission today is pretty robust. First, we need to uncover why precision matters so deeply. And it's not just about sounding confident. Then we're going to dissect the most common verbal traps.
The leaks.
The leaks, exactly. The leaks in our communication that just drain our effectiveness. And then, and this is the important part, we're going to build you a practical, actionable toolkit.
Right. Things you can use immediately.
For achieving crystal clarity and maximum impact, even in a real-time conversation.
Because if you, the listener, have the best analysis or the most compelling solution in the room, but you bury it, if you bury it in wake verbs or vague language or these hedging phrases we'll get into, you are forcing your audience to do all the work. Precision, at its core, is an act of efficiency.
It's a form of respect, really.
It is. It reduces misunderstanding, it saves time, and crucially, it increases the likelihood that your message will be not just absorbed, but actually acted upon.
And when you respect the listener's time by choosing your words that carefully, you instantly establish credibility. It's almost automatic. It demonstrates that you've done the cognitive work ahead of time, ensuring that the listener doesn't have to do that heavy lifting of interpretation. And that, right there, is where authority begins.
Okay, so let's unpack this with a bit more depth. When we communicate, I think we tend to fixate on the content, the raw data, the facts.
What? Exactly. But the research we analyzed argues that when we open our mouths, we're actually trying to achieve 3 distinct goals at the same time. And to be effective, you have to master all 3.
That's right. And recognizing this trio, it fundamentally changes the way you prepare for every single interaction, whether it's professional or personal.
So the first goal is the obvious one. It's the straightforward transfer of information. Are the facts, the figures, the data, are they actually making it from your brain to theirs intact?
Number 2 is the creation of an experience. This is the one people often forget.
Yeah.
Are you engaging them? Are you, frankly, boring them? Are you confusing them? Are you making them feel respected, or are you just wasting their time? This is the whole emotional and intellectual context of the exchange.
And the third goal, which is so often the silent killer of good communication, is that you are actively building trust and establishing credibility.
Every single word choice.
Every single one. Every stutter, every precise phrase, it all contributes to this ledger of how trustworthy and authoritative you appear.
And precise language is the ultimate amplifier for all 3 of those goals. If your language is sloppy, even if your information is perfectly sound, the experience for the listener is poor, and their trust in your overall competence just plummets.
They make a logical leap, right?
They do. They assume, pretty logically, that if you can't manage your words, you probably can't manage a project either.
Okay, let's use a classic case study from our material. to really illustrate the real-world cost of imprecision.
Yeah.
This is especially true when you're talking about accountability and deadlines. So contrast this week, very common statement. We should probably try to do something about the issue soon.
I think I've heard that sentence 1,000 times.
We've all said it. Versus the strong directive statement. We must address this problem by Friday.
Right. It's night and day.
It's night and day. They both express concern. They both suggest action is needed. But one is a declaration and the other is. It's just a wish.
It's a hope. And the second one succeeds because of very deliberate, very high-impact word choices. If we break it down, the shifts are, they're tectonic.
Let's do it.
Okay, look at the weight, the difference in weight. We move from this tentative, mushy verb phrase, should probably try to do something about, to a single, powerful, non-negotiable directive, must address.
The first one is just loaded with hedging. You've got should, probably,
It gives you 3 different off-ramps.
Exactly. It suggests a tentative effort, and it provides multiple exit routes if the goal isn't met. It's self-protection.
Then look at the nouns. This is critical.
Right, the issue.
What is the issue? It's amorphous. It sounds like something annoying that might, just resolve itself if we wait long enough.
Whereas the problem, that feels concrete. It's urgent. It suggests a distinct, identifiable obstacle that requires immediate, targeted intervention.
And then, of course, the timeline. Soon is a linguistic nightmare.
It's the worst. Because for me, soon might mean before lunch. For you, it might mean next quarter.
Exactly. It's completely subjective. By replacing that ambiguity with a specific timestamp by Friday, the speaker eliminates all interpretation. It demands accountability.
So the first statement, do something about the issue soon, it basically invites debate and delay.
And the second one, address this problem by Friday, commands action and what psychologists call cognitive closure. It's settled. We know the what and the when.
So if we step back from this one example, what does this tell us about our professional impact? It seems to reveal that precision is an inherent signal of leadership.
It absolutely is. Research from various business schools shows that in professional settings, clarity and precision are read by others as decisiveness.
So we're wired for it.
We are psychologically wired to trust speakers who use language efficiently because we assume that clear speech suggests a clear thought process.
The sources we looked at, they explicitly contrast typical follower language, which awfully sounds like this cascade of self-doubt. Something like,
maybe we could consider possibly looking into that.
Yes.
That sentence.
That is the language of risk aversion. It sounds like someone is just testing the waters, hoping someone else will take the heat if the idea fails. Now, contrast that sharply with what the sources call leader language. I recommend we investigate this approach.
It's a world of difference.
That shift from a meandering wish to a direct recommendation, that's everything. The precise word choice signals that the speaker has, they've evaluated the landscape, they've weighed the risks, and they've arrived at a clear conclusion.
Strong verbs, definitive nouns, and zero hedging. They are the linguistic equivalent of a firm handshake. They convey immediate confidence.
Right.
And the absence of all that hedging demonstrates one of the most fundamental requirements of leadership. The courage to actually commit to a definitive position, even if it carries some risk.
Okay, so before we can move on to building our, communication skyscraper, we have to recognize the bad habits.
Leaky foundation.
Exactly. The common traps that weaken our speech, often without us even realizing it. The first trap is what the research consistently flags as the most pervasive one. They call it the hedge fund.
I love that name for it. It's this blanket of linguistic self-protection we wrap ourselves in.
And it's made up of words like
Kind of, sort of, somewhat, in my opinion, maybe, possibly. And the most common habitual offender of them all, I think.
We use these terms as, conversational padding. We hope it'll soften a disagreement or create an escape hatch if our idea gets challenged. But the danger is that this reflexive, habitual hedging just signals a profound lack of confidence.
Even if the idea itself is brilliant.
Doesn't matter how good the idea is.
Think about the internal reaction when you hear that agonizing example you mentioned earlier. I kind of think we should sort of consider maybe changing the approach.
It's painful to even hear.
It is. If you hear that sentence, you don't hear a recommendation, you just hear the white noise of uncertainty. You tune out.
Here's a point of friction I always wonder about. If hedging language is so obviously weak, why is it so incredibly common? Especially in corporate or academic settings. What psychological need is it fulfilling?
That's a great question, and the research points to a few reasons. First, it's a strategy for maintaining social harmony. We hedge to avoid seeming too aggressive or, authoritarian.
So it's a social lubricant.
In a way. And secondly, it lowers the personal stakes. By saying, I think, you make the statement conditional. It's just your subjective opinion, not a declarative statement of objective truth.
It's a self-defense mechanism.
Completely. It's a defense against being proven wrong.
So we're sacrificing clarity and power for the sake of social safety?
That's the trade-off, exactly. Now, we do have to clarify the nuance here. Hedging is perfectly fine when you're expressing genuine uncertainty.
Of course.
If you're presenting preliminary data, you absolutely should qualify your conclusions. The problem is the habitual use. When I think precedes every single fact, even ones you are 100% certain of.
It becomes a verbal tick.
It does, and it dilutes the meaning of everything you say, making every statement you make feel tentative and weak.
All right, so once we stop hedging, the next crucial step is ensuring the engine of our sentence, the verb, is actually doing some work.
Which brings us to trap 2, vague verbs.
The addiction to weak, functional, generic verbs.
These are verbs that are essential for grammatical structure, but they should never carry the primary meaning. We're talking about the usual suspects: do, make, get, have, and go.
They're so nonspecific, they drain all the energy out of your speech. If I say, we need to do some work on improving customer satisfaction, what does that even mean?
It means nothing. It sounds like low-priority busy work. It's utterly non-committal about the scope or the intensity of the work.
But if I use a specific, strong, high-commitment verb instead, we need to redesign our customer service protocol.
See, the word redesign tells the listener the action is systemic, it's intensive, and it requires structural change.
Vague verbs imply low-level effort,
while strong verbs mandate specific, high-stakes action. And that choice determines whether your proposal is seen as just another suggestion to be filed away or a mandate to be executed immediately.
Okay, trap 3 is maybe the most insidious because it's so prevalent in every bureaucratic document ever written.
Abstract nouns, or the technical term, nominalization.
I hate nominalizations.
They're terrible. Nominalization is this linguistic acid that turns powerful, active verbs into these clumsy, static, abstract nouns. Instead of acting, you're now engaging in the concept of the action.
It makes language so dense and bureaucratic and indirect. I sometimes catch myself doing it. I'll say something like, we need to have a discussion about the implementation of the new policy.
And you've immediately created linguistic drag. You took the verb discuss and the verb implement, and you turned them into these clunky, abstract nouns, discussion, implementation.
And I had to add extra words to make it work. Have a bat about the bath.
Right. When the simple, direct, active, and immediate alternative is just, we need to discuss how we'll implement the new policy.
It's shorter, it's clearer, it's faster to process. But let's go a little deeper here. Why is nominalization so common in bureaucracy? What's the appeal?
Because it creates distance and obfuscation. The research shows that nominalization is the language of weasel words. It allows speakers to talk about processes and concepts without actually committing to the actors or the exact mechanisms. Think of corporate jargon like, the maximization of resource utilization is essential for profit generation.
Instead of just saying, we must use our materials efficiently to make more money.
Exactly. The nominalized sentence sounds very important and official, but it's vague, it's dense, and it completely avoids saying who is responsible for the maximization and how that process will even be measured.
So nominalization is the enemy of directness, clarity, and ultimately accountability.
It really is.
Okay, our fourth trap deals with volume, but in a paradoxical way, it actually decreases it.
Intensifiers without impact.
Yes. We reach for words like very, really, extremely, and that word we abuse so often, literally. We're trying to convey passion or urgency.
But these words rarely add any real semantic weight. They're just placeholders for a better word.
So if I say, this is a very important project, I've used two words to express importance, very and important, but the message is just bland.
It's weak.
It's weaker than if I use a single, specific, powerful adjective. This project is critical or vital or essential.
Exactly. The specific, precise adjective critical carries the weight that the vague adjective important, plus the generic intensifier, very simply can't manage.
It's a bad habit born from laziness, isn't it?
It is. Instead of searching your mental lexicon for the exact word that embodies the severity or the size of the concept, we just grab the closest, easiest adjective and slap a generic amplifier on it. Precision demands finding the single word that does the job of two or three.
Speaking of laziness, trap 5 is the verbal static that makes us all sound unprepared.
Filler words and clutter phrases.
We all know the usual suspects, the nervous decks we use when our brain is processing.
And the cultural scourge of and.
Right. And excessive use just signals that the speaker is nervous or hasn't fully organized their thoughts. But the truly insidious fillers are the clutter phrases that sound professional but add zero informational meaning. I am personally trying to eliminate, at the end of the day, from my vocabulary. Others include, when all is said and done, or the fact of the matter is.
They're verbal junk food. They just waste precious attention. They signal that the speaker is winding up for a point, rather than just delivering the point.
It increases the cognitive load.
For no informational game, you have to ruthlessly cut a phrase like, the fact of the matter is. If it's the fact, just state the fact.
And finally, trap 6, which gets to the heart of obscuring accountability.
The passive voice.
Passive voice is grammatically valid, of course, but defaulting to it just weakens the message because it hides the agent of the action. The classic example you hear in every public relations crisis is mistakes were made.
Which is the linguistic equivalent of saying, things happen, but don't look at me.
Exactly. If your goal is to own the outcome, or take responsibility, or simply be crystal clear about who did what, active voice is mandatory.
Compare, the schedule was revised by the supply chain team, that's passive, versus the supply chain team revised the schedule, active.
The second one is direct. It assigns credit or blame immediately, and it's just faster to process.
Passive voice allows speakers to hide behind sentence structure, and listeners subconsciously detect that avoidance, which results in damaged credibility.
Okay, we've identified the leaks. Now let's start building. We're going to begin with the engine of speech, and that means reinforcing our verbs.
This is where the energy and the clarity really reside. Verbs do the heavy lifting, and they prevent us from needing all those weak modifiers and intensifiers we just talked about.
Let's get into the detailed example from the source material, using the generic verb walk. It's a functional word, it gets the job done, but it conveys absolutely nothing about the manner or the emotion involved.
Right. He walked out of the room. What does that look like? We have no idea.
But English provides this incredibly rich vocabulary specifically to fill that gap. Instead of saying walked slowly or walked angrily, you can choose a single precise word.
You could say he strode, strolled, sauntered, marched, trudged, shuffled, paced, swaggered, tiptoed, or stomped. Each one paints a completely different picture.
The efficiency gain is enormous. If you say someone stormed out of the meeting, that's it. You've conveyed movement, speed, emotion, and manner in one powerful word.
That's why we call them strong verbs. They're linguistically self-sufficient. They don't need help.
So the core strategy here is substitution. We have to learn to eliminate these unnecessary verb phrases.
Yes. The goal is to focus on replacing that clunky multi-word nominalization with the single precise verb.
So instead of make a decision,
you simply decide. Instead of give consideration to, you consider. Instead of provide assistance, you help. These immediate substitutions are instant, free upgrades to your clarity and your conciseness.
This leads to a really critical practical strategy the research suggests. When you catch yourself using a generic, weak verb, you need to pause. Embrace that strategic silence we'll talk more about later, and ask yourself a question.
What am I really describing here?
That mental check forces precision.
It does. If you're describing an employee who is looking at data, are they merely scanning it? Or are they analyzing it, which suggests a deeper level of processing?
Right, or are they scrutinizing it, which implies doubt or a very minute inspection?
Or even auditing it, which implies verification against a standard. Each of those choices carries a totally different level of intensity and commitment. Choosing the right one tells your listener exactly what mental and physical process is happening.
And this focus on strong verbs is really the foundation for moving from abstract goals, which are so easy to ignore, to concrete actions, which are easy to implement.
That's the key. Consider the difference between saying, we need to improve communication, which is just an abstract aspiration that can be perpetually deferred.
I've been in that meeting.
We all have. Versus the concrete action, we need to establish weekly check-ins. The second statement mandates a specific outcome and gives the listener a clear metric for success.
Furthermore, in any kind of persuasive communication, the verb choice has to match the urgency of the message. If the situation is urgent, saying, I suggest we proceed, is just. It's insufficient.
It's too weak. You have to choose verbs that carry high intention and weight. compel, demand, require, mandate, insist, recommend, propose, advocate.
When you say, I urge you to act now, the verb urge carries the necessary weight of necessity that a soft word like suggest or propose simply cannot achieve.
It changes the entire dynamic of the request.
This brings us to a topic that I think truly elevates this discussion into a deep dive. And that's the cognitive science behind concrete versus abstract language.
This is where we can actually see the efficiency of precision at a neurological level. It's fascinating. Human brains process concrete language words related to sensory experience, things you can touch, see, or taste in different regions than abstract language.
So concrete language actually activates the sensory and motor areas of the brain.
That's right. Which makes it significantly easier to understand, to visualize, and most importantly, to remember.
So when a speaker uses abstract language, they're creating unnecessary cognitive load for the listener.
Exactly. The listener has to perform this mental translation work. They have to take your abstract concept and re-encode it into a concrete, practical image in their own mind.
Which taxes their working memory and slows down processing time and recall.
If I say, we need to prioritize organizational excellence and innovation, the listener has to stop and perform that re-encoding. Okay, what does organizational excellence look like for me? Does it mean showing up on time? Does it mean cleaning my desk? It's ambiguous.
But if you say, we need every team member to submit 5 documented suggestions for process improvements this quarter, there is zero interpretation required. It's immediate, it's concrete, and it's measurable.
This is best conceptualized through something called the ladder of abstraction.
Okay, what's that?
At the very top of the ladder are the highest, most abstract goals. Success, quality, innovation, improvement. At the very bottom are the specific, tangible, sensory details. A signed contract, a 5-star review, a redesigned checkout page, or 37 new clients.
So the most effective speakers deliberately move up and down this ladder in their speech.
Constantly. They'll start with the vision, the abstraction at the top, and then immediately descend to the execution, the concrete details at the bottom.
So when discussing company values, for example, don't just state the abstract value. Provide the concrete action that demonstrates it.
Yes. Don't just say, we value integrity. Tell the story. When we discovered the billing error that coincidentally favored us by several $100s, we immediately informed the client and issued a correction, even though they hadn't noticed. That is the operational definition of integrity here.
That concrete story is infinitely more memorable, more credible, and it just lands harder than the mere statement of the value.
It's undeniable.
And this is why analogies and metaphors are considered such power tools for communication. They bridge that gap between an abstract concept and a tangible experience.
They allow you to take something complex and connect it to a shared sensory reality. If you're struggling to explain a new, abstract organizational structure with matrix teams, you could say, think of this like a relay race instead of a marathon. John handles the first leg, Sarah takes the baton for the second, and we have to ensure a quick, clean handoff.
Suddenly, that abstract concept of departmental workflow is visual, it's dynamic, and it's easy to grasp.
And never forget that numbers and specific details enhance concreteness immeasurably. You have to stop relying on quantifying words that mean nothing, like, we've seen significant growth.
Be precise. Say, revenue increased by 37% last quarter.
Right. Or instead of the vague, many customers complained, use the precise, high-impact detail. We received 243 complaints in March.
Specificity adds credibility, makes your statement memorable, and it removes any shadow of doubt or interpretive wiggle room. We mentioned earlier that English has this fascinating linguistic duality, drawing vocabulary from both Germanic or Anglo-Saxon roots and Latinate or French roots. And understanding this difference is a subtle but really powerful precision strategy.
This duality, as historians will tell you, largely stems from the Norman conquest of 1066. When the French-speaking Normans conquered England, they imposed their language, a Latin-based language, onto the court, the law, and high culture.
While the common people just kept speaking the Germanic-based Old English.
Which gave us 2 words for almost everything. One for the fancy people, one for everyone else.
And this historical context explains why the Anglo-Saxon words are generally shorter, more direct, and more emotionally resonant. They are the language of the common person and the hearth.
While the Latinate words are longer, more formal, and they often sound more abstract or intellectual.
This is such a crucial distinction. We often default to the Latinate words when we want to sound smart or formal, But in doing so, we sometimes lose the immediate connection and the punch of the simpler Anglo-Saxon term.
Let's look at more comparative pairs because the pattern is undeniable. You have help versus assistance,
Buy versus purchase.
end versus terminate,
Freedom versus liberty.
think versus contemplate, and ask versus inquire.
The Anglo-Saxon word in every one of those pairs feels inherently more direct. And in many contexts, it's just more powerful in terms of its emotional impact.
This is why great rhetoricians instinctively favor them when the goal is mass mobilization or emotional persuasion.
We talked about Winston Churchill. His most iconic, emotionally driven speeches are just masterclasses in Anglo-Saxon precision.
We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets, we shall fight in the hills, we shall never surrender.
Every key verb fight, shall surrender, is short, hard-hitting, and direct. The emotional power is amplified by the sheer simplicity of the root words.
However, and this is important, precision is always context-dependent.
Of course.
If you're speaking to experts, technical vocabulary, which is often Latinate, is mandatory for clarity. We need to refactor the code base is a precise instruction for a developer that saves pages of explanation.
But if you're speaking to the board of directors,
Then we need to reorganize how the code is written, might be the more precise, context-appropriate choice. The key is to default to the simplest, most direct vocabulary for broad communication and only escalate to formal jargon when you're communicating within a specialty.
okay, so once we've selected our powerful, direct words, the next step in refining our language is just ruthless clutter elimination. This is the stuff that creates drag on your communication.
The research identifies these redundant phrases that we all use reflexively. When you hear these, you need to treat them as fat to be trimmed. Things like past history.
Because history is inherently in the past.
Right. Or future plans, because plans are inherently for the future. End result?
A result is the end.
Collaborate together. How else would you collaborate? And advanced planning.
These just waste precious listener attention. A truly precise speaker has to ruthlessly eliminate them. But beyond the redundancies, there are these longer, multi-word phrases that can almost always be substituted by a single, stronger word.
This is a core skill for conciseness. Instead of saying, in the event that, the precise substitution is if.
Instead of due to the fact that,
You simply say because.
at this point in time,
Becomes the high-impact single word now.
for the purpose of.
Just for or to.
The cumulative effect of these small adjustments is really transformative. A speaker who consistently chooses the shorter, clearer, more concise option sounds inherently more confident. And they keep the listener engaged because there's no drag on the meaning.
You're communicating respect for their time, respect for the clock.
And finally, we have to address those throat-clearing phrases, the ones that signal intent but offer no actual content.
We use them to warm up for the main point. Phrases like, I just want to say that, or what I'm trying to express is, or the point I'm trying to make is.
They're essentially filler. They alert the listener that the point is coming, but they don't deliver the point itself. I'm so guilty of the occasional, I just want to say, when I should just be saying the thing.
And the precise speaker cuts them out entirely. Instead of, the point I'm trying to make is that we need to revise the timeline. The precise statement is simply, we need to revise the timeline.
You jump immediately to the substance.
Preserving attention by eliminating the preamble.
Our word choices don't just polish our ideas. They profoundly affect how others perceive our confidence and our authority. This section is all about the psychology of declarative language.
Right. And the big shift we need to make is moving from qualifying language to assertive declarative language.
Qualifying language is just. It's timid. The sources call it low agency language.
It's the language of, I'm no expert, but I think maybe we could consider. It pre-apologizes for the existence of the speaker and their idea.
Whereas declarative language is assertive and high agency.
Based on what I've observed, I recommend.
That second statement instantly positions the speaker as someone who has invested time, they've analyzed the situation, and now they're delivering a clear, evidence-based judgment that's worth listening to. You are instantly elevated to a figure of authority.
We also have to be really vigilant against constant self-sabotage. The research strongly advises against constant self-deprecation in professional settings.
Right.
While genuine humility is a virtue, habitually starting sentences with, this might be a stupid question, but is just training your audience not to take you seriously. You undermine your own credibility before the actual thought even begins.
And we have to curb that apologetic language. We so often say, sorry to bother you, but when we're simply asking a colleague a standard work question.
That's unnecessary deference. You are not sorry for doing your job. You are simply requesting information that is necessary for the project.
So replace that with assertive, direct framing. Instead of, sorry to bother you, but could I possibly get a moment of your time?
Use the precise, direct request. Do you have 5 minutes to discuss the project? You're stating your need clearly without undermining your own position.
And this principle applies outside the corporate world, too. Think about complex personal negotiations with a partner, a landlord, a contractor.
Yeah.
You need precision and confidence to succeed. And here's another key linguistic habit that undermines precision in both settings, the I feel trap.
I feel like has become the default replacement for I think or I believe. And while the language of feelings is perfectly appropriate for emotions, I feel anxious, I feel happy, it is tenuous for opinions, judgments, and conclusions drawn from data.
If I say, I feel like we should hire 3 new engineers, it can be easily dismissed as just a subjective emotional preference.
But if you say, I believe, based on the current workload data, that we require 3 new engineers, the language aligns with the assertion. You're using a word that indicates a reasoned conclusion.
It makes the statement sound less tentative.
And less easily brushed aside as mere subjective opinion.
Okay, now that we've established the confidence framework, let's pivot and discuss strategic word choice. Specifically, matching your words to your specific communication purpose.
This is key. So if your primary purpose is persuading, your language must create urgency and emphasize clear, quantifiable benefits.
This means you need action verbs that suggest forward movement, high stakes, and commitment.
Words like invest, commit, seize, capture, transform, revolutionize. You're trying to push the listener toward a desired state of action.
And crucially, persuasive speech has to focus on what the audience gains. You have to explicitly state the outcome of the action.
So, this proposed system will reduce your team's manual data entry by 40% annually. It's far more persuasive than merely describing the new system's features.
Right.
Persuasion also relies heavily on contrast words, however, although despite rather than instead of. These words allow you to precisely position your proposal against the alternatives, highlighting why your idea is superior.
For instance, rather than continuing with our current sales approach, which is yielding diminishing returns, we must pivot to a decentralized strategy that leverages our regional core strengths.
That's a powerful construction.
Now, what if your goal is purely informing?
Then you must prioritize clarity and structure over cleverness. This is where straightforward language and clear verbal signposts are absolutely essential.
When you're informing, especially about complex topics, you have to use verbal markers to organize the complexity in the listener's mind.
Things like, there are 3 main points we need to review today. Or, first, moving to the second point. And finally, or simply, the key takeaway is, this structure respects the listener's processing limits.
And critically, this is where you must be extremely cautious about jargon.
You have to avoid technical terms unless you are absolutely certain of your audience's expertise. And if you must use a technical term, you translate it immediately and precisely.
So don't just say, we need to optimize the API.
You translate. We need to optimize the API. That's the application programming interface that allows our front-end and back-end systems to communicate efficiently.
And finally, if your goal is inspiring,
then you move away from the dry data and you embrace emotional language and vivid imagery. You are painting a picture of a compelling future.
you're using words that evoke deep, shared human feelings. Courage, dedication, triumph, transformation, community. This is where metaphors and analogies truly shine.
You stop talking about building software features and start talking about forging the tools that will redefine our industry or creating bridges that connect people across continents.
Inspirational speech also relies heavily on rhetorical rhythm.
Yes, this means carefully executed parallel structure and strategic repetition. You build emphasis by repeating powerful phrases.
Like, we have the vision, we have the resources, we have the conviction, now we must have the courage to realize that future.
Exactly. The structure itself reinforces the message, adding a momentum that dry, purely informative language just lacks.
Choosing precise words is, relatively easy when you're drafting an email. You have time to edit.
The real test is verbal agility.
It's the ultimate test. When you're mid-conversation, navigating a high-stakes meeting, or answering a tough, unexpected question. We need real-time techniques to maintain precision under pressure.
And the single most immediate technique is substituting silence for clutter. We call it the strategic pause.
Instead of reflexively filling the space with, Or, like, while your brain is searching for the right word, you embrace a brief, purposeful moment of silence.
And this pause is interpreted entirely differently by the listener. A gap filled with signals uncertainty. A brief, deliberate silence signals thoughtfulness and deliberation.
So if I say, we need to pause, restructure the team to align with our new priorities, that momentary silence actually shows the listener that I'm selecting the best word, not just grabbing the first one available.
We can also practice what we call the substitution practice in real time. This is where you catch yourself starting a weak phrase and you immediately verbally correct it.
Like you might start to say, we should probably try to look at it.
And then you interrupt yourself. We must address this immediately by the end of the day. This momentary self-correction trains your brain, and it demonstrates to your listener your commitment to clarity.
Another powerful real-time tool is developing what the sources call a mental thesaurus.
And this isn't just knowing a bunch of synonyms, it's about categorizing them by emotional weight or intensity or context.
So if you find yourself overusing a word like good, you should have a mental catalog ready to go.
Right. Is it excellent, outstanding, superior, remarkable, or is it just adequate or sufficient?
This catalog of categorized alternatives gives you options when you're under extreme pressure. If you're describing success, you can move instantly past good to resounding or unprecedented.
And if you need just a second more to find that precise construction, don't stall with filler. You can buy time elegantly.
How do you do that?
You use purposeful transitional phrases. Things like, let me be precise about this, or to put it exactly. These phrases alert the listener that a precise, high-value statement is imminent, and it earns you that crucial moment of processing time without sacrificing your credibility.
And for long-term improvement, you really have to develop self-awareness. We often don't hear our own verbal patterns, our own hedging habits, our overuse of certain filler phrases. We are blind to our own linguistic tics.
You have to develop objective awareness. We highly recommend recording yourself, maybe using a voice memo during a low-stakes meeting or a phone call, specifically to identify those hidden verbal tics and clutter phrases.
Just becoming aware of the pattern is the first massive step towards successfully changing it.
You need to identify your personal verbal crutches. For me, it was habitually saying, you know, at the end of a sentence when I wanted affirmation. Identifying it was the only way I could start to eliminate it.
Okay, let's talk about the final layer of precision, contextual appropriateness. True precision means matching your words to the audience and the setting.
This is where we avoid the trap of just being pedantic. If you use overly formal Latinate language in a casual setting, if you walk into a staff meeting and say, let's optimize our collaborative synergies through maximized interface integration, you don't sound smart.
You sound ridiculous.
You sound ridiculous. In that context, let's find better ways to work together seamlessly is infinitely more precise because it aligns with the social setting.
And when you're speaking to non-experts, you have to avoid condescension at all costs. You have to translate jargon effectively without being patronizing.
As we noted, responsive design needs to be translated into the context-appropriate precision. The design ensures the website works well and looks good on phones and tablets.
And crucially, precision doesn't always mean bluntness. We also have to practice what we could call diplomatic precision.
It's important to be clear about your concerns while remaining respectful of the other person's effort or position.
So instead of saying, this won't work, we need to scrap it, which is just blunt,
you use diplomatic precision. I see some serious structural challenges with this approach, particularly regarding the budget constraints that we need to address before moving forward. You're precise about the existence of the issue without resorting to unnecessary negativity.
it makes the listener more receptive to your corrective input.
To build this skill long-term, you must build your vocabulary deliberately and actively. You cannot choose the perfect word if you don't know it exists.
Start with active reading and collection. When you read something, a great article, a compelling book, and you encounter a word that feels like exactly the right word for that scenario, look it up, study its roots, and note how it was used in context. Keep a running list.
Studying word roots is the ultimate vocabulary superpower. Knowing that the Latin root bene means good immediately helps you decode and understand a whole family of words like benefactor, benevolent, and beneficent.
It allows you to rapidly expand your passive vocabulary into your active vocabulary because you understand the underlying concept. The new word feels familiar.
And practice is the only mechanism that moves words from passive recognition to active, spontaneous use. Use new words in low-stakes conversations, with friends, over dinner, in internal team emails, before you deploy them in a high-stakes client meeting.
The repetition makes them spontaneous, reducing the cognitive effort needed to retrieve them under pressure.
And finally, a final detail that separates the credible speaker from the sloppy one. Addressing commonly misused words that will instantly undermine your precision.
There are 3 classic credibility killers. First, literally, which does not mean figuratively.
Please.
Second, peruse, which means to read carefully and thoroughly, not to skim. And third, fortuitous, which means occurring by chance, not necessarily fortunate or lucky.
Using words correctly according to their precise, documented meaning is the ultimate mark of credibility. When you misuse one of these common words, it signals to the highly articulate listener that you haven't mastered the basics, regardless of how strong your underlying idea is.
Wow. We've covered a substantial amount of ground today, moving from Twain's lightning bug all the way to the strategies of contextual precision.
It's a lot, but it boils down to a few key ideas. Precision is truly the foundation of credibility and influence. It requires intense self-awareness of your traps, skill in harnessing strong language, and the courage to use declarative speech.
Remember the core principles. The strongest communication uses simple, Anglo-Saxon words arranged with care.
Concrete concepts are easier for the brain to process and remember than abstract concepts.
And every single word you eliminate that doesn't add meaning is a victory for clarity.
This whole journey, it isn't about sounding impressive or using $10 words. It's about choosing language that serves your purpose and maximizes the impact of your unique ideas.
And we want to leave you with a final challenge to put this entire deep dive into immediate practice.
For the next 24 hours, we challenge you to identify and ruthlessly eliminate one specific, habitual form of hedging language from your speech.
Maybe it's I think, or kind of, or sort of, or maybe, whatever your personal crutch is. Cut it out of your conversations entirely. Embrace the strategic pause instead.
See how your perceived authority shifts when you commit to being declarative.
Ultimately, choosing strong words isn't about being clever. It's about matching words precisely to your intended meaning, demonstrating respect, and demanding attention.
When you master this skill, you don't just speak more effectively, you inherently think more clearly. And the question for you, the listener, is this. What one word are you using today that is hiding the strength of your idea?